Awesome, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April 7th Select Board meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just to let everybody know, this meeting is being recorded and broadcast on local cable. It's usually broadcast on Facebook as well. You can look these up and watch them at a later time. I'm going to ask the Select Board to introduce themselves just to ensure that we have a quorum.
Jamie Stebbins.
I'm Jennifer Stacy.
I'm Mark Lamb.
I'm Dottie Fulgenetti.
I'm Craig Barger.
And we have our Town Administrator Connor Reed, Assistant Town Administrator Sean Dugan, and Executive Assistant Elizabeth Haig. So this is being broadcast live, as I mentioned, and it is on Zoom as a hybrid. So if somebody is on Zoom and they have a question, please put your name and address in the chat for our minutes, and Sean will monitor those, and we will do our best to get to those questions as well. So the first thing that we have on our agenda is timed at 6 o'clock.
Did it get knocked over?
Did it?
No, so Jamie.
The volume is just, it's echoing over here.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. I didn't realize.
Did I screw this up though?
Nope. No, I just didn't know if we did something wrong with the computer. Sorry, Dottie.
There's a volume button.
Yeah, it's not.
You're all. Sean will mute it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have a
The saga of hybrid.
public hearing, and Craig's going to read the public hearing notice. We have two of them, so will you read the first one?
Sure. The Select Board of Easton, as licensing authorities pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 166, Section 22, will hold a public hearing in the Colleen A. Corona Boardroom, 136 Elm Street, Easton, Mass, on Monday, April 7, 2025, at 6 p.m. to consider and act on the petition of Massachusetts Electric Company, doing business as National Grid and Verizon New England, Incorporated, to install one JO pole at approximately 60 feet west of the center line of the intersection of Foundry Street and Symphony Drive, in accordance with the petition for Plan Number 31070981, dated March 11, 2025, as shown on the file with the Select Board's office.
Right, great. If you want to introduce yourself, and we'll probably ask you a couple of questions about this.
Okay. Yeah, Jared Aker, representing National Grid at 100 East Ashland Street in Brockton. So this poll petition is for installing a recloser, which is just a device that helps increase the reliability and safety of our network. Long story short, it reduces just the downtime of any outages or faults along the system.
That's so great to hear. We, as you probably know, being in Easton, with all the trees that we have when we have these windstorms, we can have a tendency to lose power in certain areas, so it's certainly welcome. Anybody have any comments or questions on this one?
No.
Oh, it's a pretty easy one.
Anything from the audience? No? All right, so we need to make a motion to, where am I here? To accept the poll petition.
I move to accept the poll petition for Massachusetts Electric, doing business as National Grid and Verizon New England, Plan Number 31070981, at Foundry Street and Symphony Drive.
Second.
So that's Barger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. All right, next one, Craig.
Select Board of Easton, as licensing authorities pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 166, Section 22, hold a public hearing in the Colleen A. Corona Boardroom, 136 Elm Street, Easton, Mass, on Monday, April 7, 2025, at 6 p.m. to consider and act on a petition of Massachusetts Electric Company, doing business as National Grid and Verizon New England, to install one JO pole on Foundry Street, beginning at a point approximately 600 feet east of the center line of the intersection of Foundry Street and Turnpike Street, in accordance with a petition for Plan Number 31071125, dated February 14th, 2025, is shown on file with the Select Board's office.
Great. You want to tell us about this one?
Same device, different location.
That's easy enough. This lists certain owners, so this, I imagine, is a broader area.
How do you mean?
It looks like on this petition, there's a bunch of different addresses on here. Right, or am I not reading this right? On Foundry Street?
Is that just in reference to the
Oh, no,
abutters?
you know what?
or is that-
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong page on it. No, disregard.
Okay.
It skipped to the next page after this. Any comments or questions on this one?
Nope.
No?
I move to approve the poll petition of the Massachusetts Electric doing business as National Grid and Verizon New England, Plan number 310-71125 at Foundry Street and Turnpike Street.
Second.
So it's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Thank you, Jared.
you
Nice
guys
to
very
see you
much.
again.
You.
Have a good night.
Thank you, too.
All right. Item 3, we have road closure requests. So the first one is Easton Pride, June 21st, 2025. Main Street by the Rockery, Barrow Street Extension from Lincoln to the Ames Free Library, and Main Street from the intersection of Main Center, Lincoln to the Ames Free Library. The event time is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and the requested closure time is 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Does anybody have any comments or questions on this one?
Beth Devonshire was going to join us. She's on her way. She said she was running a little late. I'm not sure if you want to, if that bears any difference.
Come back to it.
We'll come back.
All right, we'll come back to that one so she can tell us a little bit about that. The next one is the Easton Shoveltown Cultural District's annual End of Summer Music Festival. Joan, if you want to come up. And so this is on September 21st, 2025. Main Street, the closure will be Main Street by the Rockery to Oliver Street. The event time is 12 to 4, but the requested closure time is 11:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. to allow for a time for setup and breakdown.
I don't have much more to say. Joan Lundgren, Reynolds Street in Easton. But it's going to be a great day. As Dottie said, 9/21. It's the end of summer concert series. Steve Smith and the Nakeds, which is a big draw, will be there. So we're asking for the road to be closed because there'll be crafters, music, food trucks, the art gallery at 50 Main Street. And we've asked our neighbors, Queesit, the library, to participate and have events for everybody. So in the name of safety and people walking the street, would ask that the road be closed.
And I just want to add one other thing, is, because I always have to have another thing, right, Joan? One of the things with the Shoveltown Cultural District that's really important is bringing on people with different abilities and capabilities. So this particular concert is going to be opened and kicked off by the Spectrum of Sound Choir. It's the Flutie Foundation's inclusive choir of autism self-advocates with upbeat and lively music for all to enjoy. So I'm really happy to say that. The town, across the board, Joe Pitti in the Recreation Department just won an award for being inclusive with different abilities for the programs that he's running. And we're really recognizing that in all of our boards and committees. So I'm really happy that they were able to do this for us and really looking
I am
forward
as well.
to it. All right, any comments or questions? And usually there is a know before you go, so look for that so you'll know where to park and what things are happening
Absolutely.
at what
We'll have a
time.
map and all of that.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a good time. I hope I see you all there.
All right, if there's no comments or questions.
I
Craig,
move
you
to
wanna make a
approve
motion?
the Easton Shoveltown Cultural District's annual End of Summer Festival, Summer Music Festival, Main Street, September 21st, 2025, road closing Main Street by the Rockery to Oliver Street. The event time is 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. The requested closure time, though, is 11:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
Thanks, Joan. See you tomorrow.
I'll see you tomorrow night. Thank you.
All right, next.
I just forgot to hit record, so you're just going to hear a brief.
Recording in progress.
Just wanted to give you the heads up.
No
Thank you.
problem.
We're good now.
Okay, next we have junk license renewals. So the first one is the Emporium of Retro and Interesting Collectibles. This is what I was seeing on my screen before when I thought there were multiple places for the poll. The Emporium of Retro and Interesting Collectibles has an application. The South Shore Gold, they're located at 447 Turnpike Street, Easton. South Shore Gold at 559 Foundry Street, Easton. And JD Enterprise at 10 Wallace Drive, Easton. So we call these junk licenses, which is kind of not a great name for them, but they're usually organizations that sell different metals and things like that. So anybody have any comments or questions on these renewals? All right, do you want to approve these as the slate, Craig? Make a
Sure. I
motion,
move
please.
to approve the junk license renewals for the slate Emporium of Retro and Interesting Collectibles, South Shore Gold, JD Enterprise.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. We'll do a roll call vote.
Stebbins, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Slate.
Oh, Stebbins, Slate.
Stacy Slate.
Lamb Slate.
Full Genetti Slate.
Barger Slate.
All right, thank you. Next, we have some one-day liquor licenses. So these are all for Stonehill College, and I'm just going to read them off, and we can do these as a slate as well. So we have a baseball alumni and family day at W.B. Mason Stadium, Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, April 26, 2025, from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. with a storm date of April 27th. The reunion barbecue in the May Pavilion tent, May 31st, 2025, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. with a storm date of June 1st. The equestrian team banquet in Donahue Hall, April 27th, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. with a storm date of April 28th. The reunion class social in Alumni Hall, May 30th, 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. with a storm date of May 31st. The reunion reception in the Meehan building, May 30th, 7 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. with a storm date of May 31st. And the reunion gala in the sports complex, May 31st, 7 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. with a storm date of June 1st. Any questions?
Oh, I move to approve the 6 beer and wine, one-day beer and wine licenses as a slate.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb, and we'll do a roll call on that.
Stebbins, Slate.
Stacy Slate.
Lamb Slate.
Slate?
Barger Slate.
All right, excellent. Just moving along. Next, we have the Easton Housing Authority appointment. So there is one seat on the Housing Authority that the Select Board appoints. This is a town-appointed tenant seat. We have 3 applicants. One of them isn't going to be here tonight, so I'm just going to introduce them, ask them to come up one at a time in the order that I have them in the packet. So the first one is Dawn Burrows. Dawn, if you want to come up, and you can sit at that seat and just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you want the seat on the Housing Authority as the tenant seat.
Yeah, good evening. My name's Donald Burrows. I reside at 97 Elise Circle at the Easton Housing Authority. I was elected to the board in 2020, and I've had an opportunity to grow, to learn a little bit. I kind of walked in, eyes closed, and it's an opportunity for me to give back. I am really quite proud of what the board has accomplished. Right now, we got 10 buildings going through re-siding and window replacement. We're looking at some major, just under $1 million worth of roadway and sidewalk, and I'd like to be a part of that. So at the end of my 5-year term, I asked myself, if there was a reason I didn't want to serve, and I couldn't come up with a reason. So here I am. Thank you.
It's a 5-year term?
Yeah.
That went by fast.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next we have here was Nathaniel Lasser. He's not able to be here, but he's a veteran of the Massachusetts Army National Guard. He was employed as a cook and worked his way up to become a restaurant manager. He was then in the medical field and acted as a sleep tech, somebody who performs sleep studies on patients. So he comments that the people have been nothing but wonderful, and he feels truly blessed to be there. So that is his. And then we have Alice Maraglia. I hope I pronounced that properly. Yes, you did. Come on up, Alice.
My name is Alice Maraglia. I'm a recent, I want to say employee, but that's not right. So I moved here 2 years ago, up from Florida. I was originally from Avon, and I am also retired veteran, and I serve the VA hospital as a volunteer working with patients and taking them to chapel services. I am a lay minister in that field, in administration, chaplain's assistant. I would like to see more involvement from the patrons of the Lee Circle and Parker Terrace and the senior community who are veterans to make sure that they're getting the needs met that they have, or, reevaluate some of the services that they aren't aware of and that they'll be able to encompass into their daily life. I'm also an Uber driver, so I meet people all the time that have sufficient needs and things that are of, great importance. The other thing is that I've been working with the homeless community for over a year now, bringing out sleeping bags, money, food, clothing, and that's on a daily basis. I am on the road while I'm driving for Uber, and I'll always find someone who's in need. So over the last 6 months, I've collected probably over 150 sleeping bags, blankets, food, out on the streets feeding people 3 days a week. So it's a commitment. That's my lifestyle. That's what I do. And I would love to see more involvement in the community in both of the terraces and hopefully be an example to others to give.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for your service, Alice.
You're welcome.
So we have 3 candidates and unfortunately only 1 seat that we can pick. So these are very difficult, especially when we have 3 excellent candidates. Don has served on there, and he's, I hear that you've done a really good job, and I think that generally we will reappoint. I like to reappoint somebody that's been on there and done a good job. What I will say is there's no shortage of areas for volunteering, whether it be at Elise Circle or Parker Terrace, also at the Frothingham Hall. And I think it's so admirable, Alice, that you've been helping the homeless. I'll say that the Holy Trinity Lutheran Church up on Lincoln Street does a meal for the homeless. Every Tuesday they do bagged lunches, and once a month they do a meal. So there's a lot of community support for things like that, and I just appreciate that you really make such a big commitment to that.
I've been going on Marketplace every day, and people that are selling things that they're trying to get rid of, I'll either bid them down or ask them to donate to the Veterans Association of Bristol County. And that's where I was able to collect so many blankets, sleeping bags, and whatever they need, clothing. So it's been a great experience.
Good for you, Alice. Good for
And,
you.
Massachusetts has some of the best veteran services that are in the country, to be honest with you. And we have a veteran services officer, and there are a lot of veterans benefits that are listed on our town website for tax relief, and then other things, other types of assistance. So we appreciate you spreading the word of that, because you're right, some people don't know about it, and we really want to get that out there.
The Female Veterans Association out of Florida, I was involved with that for a couple of years before I moved here. And they encompass the women of the veterans community to make sure that their needs are provided for, whether they're single, widowed, married and with children and have families or whatever. And we were able to reach quite a few female veterans struggling in addiction recovery as well.
That's great, very honorable. So what does the board, Jamie?
Yeah,
Is that with you?
you want me to go? Sure.
Sure.
I just want to thank Mr. Burrows, Ms. Maraglia, and Mr. Lasser, who's not here, but to Dottie's point, thank you all. I think it was a tough decision. We have great candidates here, and thank you so much for your selfless service and all of you. It means a lot to me. I have young kids who I'm continuing to try to show by doing, right? Get out and get them involved in volunteer opportunities at a young age so they come up with a sense of service and giving back. So thank you very much. Stebbins, so I'm going to vote for Ms. Maraglia.
Okay, Jen?
I'm also going to vote for Ms. Maraglia.
Mark?
I am going to vote for Don, Mr. Burrows.
And I'm going to vote for Mr. Burrows.
And I'll vote for Mr. Burrows.
Okay, so that's 3-2. Mr. Burrows, you'll hear from the town clerk about swearing in and so forth. And Alice, I hope to see you at other things. I'd love to connect with you and see if there's other areas that you might want to participate in. So I have your contact information. I'll reach out to you.
Very good, thank you.
All right, thank you
you
so
both.
much.
Thank you all.
both.
And Dennis, I should also mention that the chair of the Housing Authority, Dennis Sheedy, is here, and glad you're here for us tonight. Awesome. All right. Next on the agenda is We're going to get the,
Donnie, Beth has joined us as well.
I'm sorry, Beth. My brain is a few steps ahead of me. We're going to go back to the Easton Pride for June 21st, 2025. Beth, if you want to come up. So this is a road closure request to close down the road, the same as what we just discussed before, essentially for the cultural district, but Main Street by the Rockery, Barrow Street Extension, from Lincoln to the Ames Free Library, and Main Street from the intersection of Main Center, Lincoln to the Ames Free Library. The event time is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The road closure time is 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And this is for Easton Pride.
Correct.
Beth, if you
Our
want to
fourth.
introduce yourself and tell us about what the event is.
Sure. I'm Beth Devonshire. I'm the chair of the Human Rights Committee. So the event will be our fourth annual Pride Committee or Pride Day. So we will have hopefully vendors, food, and both commercial vendors. If you've been, we've had on average about 1,000 people per year, which is great for a little town like ours. I think still continues to be important. Representation is important. So we're working hard as a committee to get it all done, but we obviously need the road to close to make sure that we can.
Excellent. I just want to thank you for your work on the Human Rights Committee. You've been on there for a while now, and
Yeah.
really a very strong leader, and the Human Rights Committee is just doing some amazing things. So
I
I just want to
appreciate that.
acknowledge that and thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll bring it back to the team. So they work hard.
And Craig,
thank you,
you're the Select Board representative to the HRC as well, so thank you for filling that role for the
enjoy
Select
it.
Board.
I enjoy it.
Any questions about the event?
No, this is great. And to your point, what a turnout for a
Yeah.
community our size. And so I hope that the weather plays, I hope Mother Nature doesn't do this.
I was going to say, please knock on some wood because we've lucked out the past few years. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Any other comments, questions? All right, Craig.
I just think it's a great event, and I'm proud to be a part of it, so. I move to approve the Easton Pride road closure request for June 21st, 2025, Main Street by the Rockery, Barrow Street Extension, from Lincoln Street to the Ames Free Library, and Main Street from the intersection of Main Center and Lincoln to the Ames Free Library. The event time is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Requested closure time is 7 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you
Best
so
of
much.
luck on it, and
Thanks.
we'll help try to promote it ourselves.
Please do. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
All right, if it's okay with the board, I'd like to skip a couple and get right to the town administrator's budget update. We're hoping that people are watching this at the beginning of the meeting and it doesn't get buried in the later part of the meeting. So Connor and Wendy, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Sean is just going to get a presentation pulled up on screen. And while he does, this isn't a formal budget update. I don't have a change memo from 2 weeks ago. But I wanted to give the board an update on where we stand, and hopefully with this being earlier in the evening and there's folks watching on any of the streaming platforms, they catch some of this as well. So this is working information. It's not final, but again, wanted to share information about the budget as things develop, which we plan to finalize this month. So this is in the past. I won't belabor it, but I think it's really important for anyone who's tuning in for the first time or catching this. Where we stand today is not informed by choices that we made this week or last month. This budget in particular has a lot of challenges that we've been working on for a long time on the revenue side, and some newer challenges on fixed costs that really have grown out of control in the past 2 years. Procedurally and as far as working with the public, this budget's been very unique and I think productive, where we had a tough town meeting last year as we started to dip into stabilization funds meaningfully for the first time, and served as a both warning, but thankfully due to our building of our reserves, enough capacity there for everyone to fully understand that we had 12 months to figure this out. And we didn't want to just do 12 months of figuring it out the old way, which is all of us who are employed to manage the budget have to do our job, whether there's a lot of people at our meetings or sometimes very few. We wanted to make sure the public was staying tuned and wasn't only hearing about the budget the night they walked into town meeting. And so At that town meeting a year ago, Promoting a Sustainable Easton was created. That is a 19-person resident-led committee that has been looking at the town and school operations, looking at our salaries, looking at our programming, looking at how every single penny of our books are spent, with a charge to come back to the elected leadership of the community and ultimately town meeting to recommend what do we need to do as a community to promote sustainable services for the town and schools. PACE was seated and began meeting in late August and has been holding on average 2 meetings per month that go regularly to 5 hours long, televised, to go through, as I've said, every single line of our budget in excruciating detail publicly, to deliver a status report first, which they did in December, which reaffirmed that the town of Easton and our schools spend far less compared to similar communities and school districts. We staff fewer people in doing so, including management and administration. And this was largely a revenue side problem that flows from 20 years of minimum revenue from the state for K-12 education, 19 years of no operating override, and a reflection of generations of policy choices that we have all made. Not to say that they're wrong, but that have leaned heavily on historic preservation, open space preservation, and that results in a town where roughly 1/3 of our land is preserved, undevelopable, state-owned, Stonehill, and what matters about all that, and that contributes to the beauty of Easton, it contributes to high property values for the other land, is that land pays minimal or no taxes, which means that revenue has to then disproportionately come from the rest. So by December, PACE presented that given the financial gap we were facing due to state aid challenges and fixed costs, that our choices going into this May were going to be 2. Very large expense cuts or a tax override. PACE began holding open houses and inviting the public in to get their feedback. In January, we had a great open house at the Queeset House. Preliminary budget was issued in January. There's another open house in February where 200 or more residents came to join us, and that was a great process. We have kept working on updating our budget throughout the spring. The last formal budget change was 2 weeks ago, and last week, at that same meeting 2 weeks ago, PACE delivered their final recommendation to the Select Board, which was a $7.3 million override, along with a community compact on a variety of policy commitments that we would make to the community on how to maximize the benefit and enhance the longevity of that override so that we're not asking again in 1 or 2 years, because obviously that's a hard ask to consider a tax increase. That pledge was unanimously adopted by the Select Board, the Finance Committee, and the School Committee by the end of that week. Last week, the Easton School Committee held their hearing on the proposed budget for the Easton Public Schools. We have major dates coming up in April and May. There will be more dates than what's shown here on screen as far as informational opportunities. PACE is meeting this Wednesday to get some more dates on the board, so to speak, but we know these things for certain. Major dates for voters to be aware of: on April 29th, which is a Tuesday, there will be the final hearing on the town and schools budget. That will include both the balanced budget, which will be balanced through millions in cuts to the town and school budget and millions of reserves, weakening our long-term finances, or the override budget, which will largely preserve services. There will be a third and final open house held by PACE in late April, early May. We're going to try and button that up this week and notify everyone of that opportunity to learn more. And then, of course, voters have 2 critical dates, whether they wish to support a budget that has an override or to vote against one. That is a personal choice, that is their choice, but there are 2 votes there, which is May 19th, which is the annual town meeting, and then June 10th that the Select Board is scheduled, which is a special town election for the override.
So can you just elaborate just a little bit more? There's going to be 2 budgets delivered,
That's right.
and the first one is the budget with cuts because we have to get to a balanced budget.
That's right.
So with the money that we have, version 1 is going to be getting to a balanced budget, and here's the cuts that make it happen. The second one is an override budget, and that's if we are to be able to get this vote for the funding, this is what the budget will look like with that. So there'll be a choice between the 2 budgets.
That's correct, and it ultimately is not any of our choice, although we can make recommendations. It will be a choice of our voters to decide that. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So updates since the 24th. On the operating side, the Easton Public Schools presented a draft. I want to reiterate that it's a draft. It's pending finalization and a vote of the school committee on April 17th. So all the figures that are in this presentation reflect what was publicly presented, but they don't necessarily reflect the final product. Just want to put that caveat out there. We still have a couple of final fixed cost adjustments that are outstanding. We are anticipating final pricing for property, casualty, and liability insurances, as well as a minor reduction in the projected snow and ice deficit, assuming we don't get any late season surprises. Revenues outstanding, I just want to note, and this is typical at this point, that we are still working with the governor's budget proposal. The House and Senate will have their own iterations, and in Massachusetts it is common that we will not have a final state budget until after town meeting. I highlight these things because as people tune into this, sometimes for the first time, they see our budgets iterate over time, and we start with a deficit that's north of $6 million, and we end up with one that has no deficit, and folks say, oh, they must just be finding the money. And as I show on the next few slides, just how painful finding the money actually is. There is no such thing as finding the money. There is updating revenue with actual information that comes in, and there is cutting expenses. So we are working on finalizing the non-override budget. That's going to be one of those two choices that Dottie referenced. Town department requests, which were an increase of 5.3% over the current year, have been cut by $784,000 for a total of a $21 million ask, which is only 1.6% above current year spend. The draft public school budget presented last week, which was an initial request of an 8.2% increase, proposes $2.36 million in reductions for a total of $51.54 million, which is a 3.6% increase over the current year. The impact of these cuts are extraordinary. And they're also consistent, and I think this is important, because one of the things that we hear as we get closer to town meeting is that the severity of this seems shocking, that this seems to be surprising. These figures are consistent with what we have been discussing with PACE for months at this point, but doesn't make them any less terrible, but I think that that's important information. But collectively, between the town and schools, we are looking at 50 or more positions being eliminated, which is about 7% of our public workforce. On the town side, and this is information that the board has seen before, the town will eliminate 6.95 full-time equivalent positions in fiscal 26. It cuts across all departments. Health and Community Services is not losing a position, but will be closing the pool this summer in order to redirect funding in order to save a position. Every other cost center on the town side is having positions eliminated. The figure that I just cited doesn't include 5 additional positions which are currently vacant due to resignations or long-term injury absences. So collectively, the town will be entering this summer, should this be the budget we adopt, with a dozen fewer personnel to support our operations, which is about 7% of our budgeted workforce. As the red text up here already shows, and I think that this is really important because as you go through tough budgets, folks understandably ask, well, how did we get here? Was there too much spend? We are already spending substantially less in all of our departments right now, before these cuts. In some of our departments, like general government, we spend less than half per resident, what is typical of organizations of our size. And we will be cutting even deeper into those.
Connor, just while you're on that slide, I think it's important to point out that's before this next round of cuts.
Correct.
That's where we stand compared to our comparable communities, which
That's right.
we just wish everybody knew.
If there's a stat there that I think is also worth pointing out, because it's something that does come up, and I'll talk more about it later, but something that comes up during hard budget years is also something that can be challenging to talk about and is not always said at a public meeting, which is, well, we must just have too many staff, or we must pay everyone way too much money. And our books are public, our salaries are public, our collective bargaining agreements are public, my employment agreement is public, our books are audited annually, and the Department of Revenue actually aggregates payroll spend and headcount on the statewide level, which is great, because those are fair questions and important questions. But it's great because we can go get the facts. And what the facts show is that even before these cuts, Easton employs 27% fewer employees per thousand than our neighbors do. And so that sounds rather amorphous. And so to put numbers on that, we employ 711 FTE between the town and schools to serve over 25,000 people. If we were staffing the town and school departments at the same rate, normalized rate of our peers, we would have to hire more than 250 additional employees. That's more than the entire town government, town workforce. That's more than police, fire, public works, general government, health and community services put together. And these are not my opinions. These are facts that the Department of Revenue collects. And I think that that's really important because, again, it's not unfair for someone to ask, but it is important that when we ask, we do so from a place of curiosity to want to understand the information. And the information is out there. It's linked here, and it's made available on all of our budget presentations.
I think something else that's noteworthy in all of our positions is that we do salary comparisons with other communities, because if our wages are too low, we're not going to attract a good workforce.
Correct. Which is
an
not
excellent
an acceptable approach when you are staffing roughly 2/3 the amount of staff to accomplish the same work.
Right. And we do have an excellent workforce. We want to retain them. We value them, and we want people to know that.
Right.
So, nobody is making an exorbitant amount more than the average. And sometimes if you look online and you ask what the average is, you're going to get an average across the whole state, which is going to include, small towns, rural towns, and so the numbers are a little bit skewed.
Sure.
We do all our comparisons to communities that have the same numbers as us, the same per capita, the same population, similar characteristics.
Similar labor forces, right?
Similar labor forces,
markets,
so.
right? The presentation of the school committee last week showed a significant amount of cuts, with more than 40 positions across the district being eliminated or reduced. The slide on screen, again, is a draft pending a final vote of the committee, so I'm not representing that this is where the district will ultimately land, but this is what was presented publicly to the school committee last week. I know I keep breaking PowerPoint rules by having beautiful mind slides, but I think it's important to have all this data because it's going to live online, and I hope people read it. The left-hand side of the screen, those three boxes, show the allocation of the available new revenue next year. So when you look at our revenue next year, and you see that on the top right, when you don't count debt exclusion revenue that has to go towards specific projects, the funds that are available for operations is an increase of just a fraction of a hair over 4%, so $4,175,000. And what I want to draw the board's attention, and hopefully anyone who's watching this is attention to on the left, that's where that money is being allocated in the non-override budget. And the single largest thing on that screen is not the schools, it's not police, it's not fire, it's definitely not town hall. It is fixed costs. It's insurance, it's regional school assessments, and I think that that's important. The takeaways that we can deduce from this is that this is bearing out what we've been talking about for 2 years, right? Which is that on the expense side, the major challenge is not that we're increasing town and school budgets too fast. It's not that we're hiring too many new people. It's that we have a certain growth pattern now on fixed costs, which is new, right? Because there's a question of how did this happen suddenly? This has basically changed in 18 months, where for years it was not uncommon for Easton to see healthcare go up 3-4%. And now in 2 years, it's grown more than 20%. In fiscal year 2025, fixed cost growth consumed 36% of our new revenue. This year, it will consume half of it. That is a major contributor to why we are here. I think it's also really worth pointing out that that $4 million revenue increase, $2.37 million of that is stabilization fund money. It's almost a misnomer to call it revenue because it almost implies it's recurring. It's not. So the real revenue growth is lower than that. Our revenue is insufficient for a long-standing reason, which is minimum state aid, and that we've not had an override for 19 years. Our expense capacity is insufficient due to fixed cost inflation, not from the town or school departments overspending, and not because one department took an unfair share from the other. Our spending data shows that every department is under-resourced. That can't be true, while at the same time it's true that one department is apparently getting everything they need and no one else is. No department is being funded at the level that we wish they were to serve the children of this community or the residents of this community. That last bullet sounds, I am hesitant to even use language like that because I recoil when there's a discussion of the town budget or the school budget or this budget or that department budget, because it's one budget for one community. And we are working within the revenue constraints imposed on us by state law to do the best that we can for everyone. But I also think it's important to talk about it, because when budgets are tight and we have to make really hard decisions, it's natural to ask the how and the why of how we got to where we are. It's understandable for a given constituent who cares deeply about a particular service, whether that's education or community programming or the library or public safety, to question whether that department that they are focusing on is not receiving the full capacity that they know our great people could deliver, because maybe those funds went somewhere else. So it's important that we take every opportunity as we get closer to town meeting to state the facts. And as I mentioned earlier, not just the facts of budgets, not our opinion, but looking at things that are assessed by outside groups, whether that's auditors who look at our books every year, whether that's data aggregation by the State Department of Revenue, whether that's citizen-led committees like PACE taking a look at how we're managing things here. And what that data shows is that cost inflation, which is a lot more than the 2.5% cap on our largest revenue, which is property taxes, is the cost inflation we're facing is not from overspending on our departments. Our total, including town and school, the town's total spend per resident is 17% below the average community in Massachusetts. It's in the bottom third of all communities in Massachusetts. It is the lowest spend per resident among our 8 comparable communities economically, and it is the second lowest spend amongst our neighboring towns per resident. PACE looked at these data sets. They also made sure to look at staff levels. And the truth is we have fewer staff across the board, whether that's police, fire, public works. That includes school and town governmental leadership. It was true in the 2017 operational audit. It was true in the 2020 budget subcommittee assessment, and it remains true to this day. And again, data that's out of house corroborates this. Data from the Massachusetts Department of Revenue that I touched on earlier that aggregates headcount and salary shows that among our neighboring towns that have a K-12 school system, Easton's headcount is the lowest staff per thousand of every single community. It is shown on screen. We staff 28 town and school employees per 1,000 residents here. If you go in order of our neighbors, it is 30, 34, 36, 38, 41, and 50. We staff 27% below that average of 38. Were Easton to be staffing at the average amount of town and school employees per 1,000 residents, we would need to hire 258 people. So the expense growth that is straining that side of our budget has not been from overspending on town and school departments. It is from explosive growth to fixed costs like healthcare, utilities, transportation, pensions, and regional school assessments. I know the board has seen this, but again, I think it's worth bringing this up every time we talk about the budget in the event that there's even a single new person tuning in. We have those two challenges of why this is happening now. One is on the expense side and one's on revenue. So on the expense side, the major contributor to the deficit is the explosion in fixed operating costs. That's health insurance, property insurance, pension assessments, and regional school assessments. You could see them up here on screen. You could see the 2-year increases, 20%, 16%, 17%, 41%. These 4 items have grown $3.6 million in 2 years. Remember back to that other slide that even when we're counting our leveraging of reserve funds, we have about $4 million of new dollars to allocate. So the growth in these 4 fixed costs in the past 2 years is almost as much as what we have for everything this year. The increase to healthcare, which is the largest one of these, which has grown by about $2 million in 2 years, is more than it grew in the past 10 years. It is more money than we have added to the police budget in 10 years. That 3.6 figure in 2 years' time is nearly or more than 10 times what I am proposing we increase every single town department. When you add up police, fire, public works, general government, health and community services, the library, all of those departments collectively out of over $100 million organization, their increase is $332,000 next year. These fixed costs have gone up more than tenfold that in the past 2. Our largest revenue this year is going to grow by 2.6 million. Compare that to 3.6 million in growth in 2 years. Our second largest revenue, which is state aid, that's the second largest source of income for Easton, is going to grow 361,000 this year, which is a tenth of what those costs have increased in the past 2 years. We have not taken this information and despaired or sat on our hands with it. The rates for healthcare that were set by the GIC in February were actually worse than the 12% increase that they forecasted. And there was a low of the plans offered. The low was 10% and the high was over 17%. That would pose a major challenge to any organization in a given year. But coming off of last year where these costs already went up 10%, it's catastrophic. The board adopted reductions to retiree healthcare contributions starting this January on a go-forward basis. We've been meeting with our unions to explore if there's other things we could do to save the public money, not our employees, but the public money on health insurance. And we've worked to expand our incentive and opt-out programs to try to incentivize folks to switch from costlier plans to more cost-effective ones or to leave the insurance pool altogether. That's allowed us to reduce some of that. It's still a catastrophic increase, but we were able to cut that down to an 11% increase.
And when
which
you
is
say leave
100,000.
the insurance pool, you're looking at the scenario that somebody else in the family has insurance.
Correct.
We're not saying go without insurance.
Yes, you can't do that. It's,
Right.
yeah, right.
So we're
It's
saying
insurance mandatory in the
If your
state.
partner has health insurance and you're on our plan, consider going on their plan and see if that saves
That's
you
right.
money and us money.
Yeah, we do a savings share where the savings, depending on the plan to the town, a portion of that is paid to the employee to opt out as long as they have alternative insurance elsewhere. And the cost of insurance is so high for the town that even with a savings share, we still net out very positively.
Mm-hmm.
So the second part of why this is happening. So we have the more recent, about 18 months worth of explosive inflation on those costs. And then we have a very long-standing thing that's been challenging us kind of in the background this whole time, which is that we have been a minimum aid community entitled to as little as $30 per student of new state education funding per year, which shakes out to about $100,000 against the public school's $50 million budget. Other major categories of state aid, like unrestricted general government aid, to this day, not adjusting for inflation, are still funded at lower levels than they were before the 2008 financial crisis. So Easton passed an override, its last override in 2006. 2 years later, the global financially collapsed. Shortly after that, the state cut local funding to communities, including Easton, deeply. In our case, wiped out a significant amount of a revenue benefit of that override. And it took Easton 8 years to get back to pre-recession numbers, again, not adjusting for inflation. And if you look here on screen, you can see where we're at, about 12.9 million of actual revenue from the state in fiscal 25. Had we simply grown up a rate of inflation from where we were before the financial crisis, that revenue would be closer to 17 million today, and we would be having an extremely different conversation. I wanted to go a little bit deeper on what does minimum aid actually look like for a school system, and in our case, Easton's school system. The chart on screen shows the total state funding to Easton to fund Easton Public Schools. If you go from the bottom, you see it goes from 2010 to 2025. State funding is shown as a blue bar. You would be forgiven for thinking it was copy and pasted because it doesn't look like it moves much, and that's because it doesn't. It's grown by about 1% a year. So what this means when we're receiving a minimum statutory increase of state funding for education of $30 per student per year, as I said before, that's 100,000 of new revenue. That's equal to 0.2%, so 1/5 of 1% of the annual budget for the schools. Since 2010, Chapter 70, state aid, to the schools has funded only 7.5 cents of every new dollar of their budget. During those years, state aid went from funding roughly 31% of the school budget to 22% today, and local funds have had to make up the difference, and we have done so without having an override during that time. I'm using this again to really make the point that we've had that long-term revenue issue. The question of the town must have known this is coming. We've known we've had that revenue problem for a very long time. Anyone who's gone through any of our budget presentations know that we highlight it annually, but we frankly got quite good at managing with that revenue challenge and going 19 years without an override. But it's really that broadside on the fixed cost that is pushing us over the edge. And the last thing I want to touch on here is that this is not unique. This is not a reflection of some set of circumstances that's only befallen Easton. This is happening all around us. This is not an Easton problem. In the past 2 years, the number of school districts in Massachusetts that are considered minimum aid went from the minority of school systems. So Easton Public Schools have been advocating and lobbying to the state for years and years and years and years about inequities in the funding formula. But they used to be in a very small club of communities that were minimum aid. Now, 77% of public schools in Massachusetts are minimum aid. It is not an accident, it's not a coincidence that in the same 2 to 3 year window, we have the second largest source of revenue for many communities, which is that state education funding, that as that moved to minimum funding status, while health insurance and other fixed costs began growing 10% per year, the rate of overrides being sought around the state has doubled. It's cold comfort, but again, I think for anyone following along, it's really important information that our community should keep in mind when they consider hard budget choices that we have to make this spring. You will see a very long laundry list on that screen. That is all the communities who are seeking overrides, and that's just through December of last year. That doesn't include ones that we know that folks have been seeking, whether that's in Duxbury, whether that's in Natick, whether that's Milton. But this is, we're really in an extraordinarily difficult position as an industry, so to speak. If the current cost trends continue and the state revenue picture continues, the wheels are going to just come off the bus. It's just not sustainable. We want folks to stay informed and engaged as we proceed now through town meeting and the election. I think one of the single best things people could do if they're not is sign up for the Town Crier. It's a weekly email newsletter. If you are signed up for that, I know that that's hard because we have so many newsletters coming through. We have so much junk. We delete probably half of the email that we get on our personal emails. But if you get that and read a handful of things in it, you'll know 90+% of this stuff. We share it. We keep updates in there. We share key dates. We send summaries. We send detailed links. So go to easton.ma.us/towncrier. You can sign up there. We have created a dedicated override webpage so that all the key dates, all the key budget information, all the references to PACES information is all in one place. This is not a web page that is lobbying in one way or another. That's not for the town. That's not for me to do. It's not telling folks, here's only how you go vote yes. It is, here's the information. Here are the facts. Here are the dates. This will be a difficult choice, but it is one that ultimately gets decided by voters. So the select board calling for an override, it doesn't force an override. The town administration can't force an override. It simply is putting the choice in front of our voters because the impacts on both sides of that ledger are going to be significant. And whether that's the cuts to jobs and services that our community relies on, or whether that's a tax increase during an incredibly difficult cost of living crisis for many people. There's no easy answer there. And so that's why it's ultimately a choice for the community. So that's easton.ma.us/override. If you have not been following along, and this is the first time you tune in, it's really worth the read of the frequently asked questions on the PACE website. A lot of these questions are cyclical. That's because a lot of these questions are good questions that make sense, so people naturally gravitate towards a handful of them. So a lot of those questions are already there. That's at PACE FAQ. And then if folks prefer to have conversations in person, I'll be having another set of office hours on the budget a week from now, Monday, April 14th at 6 p.m. at the Queesit House, 51 Main Street, so you can come chat with me in person. You could also visit our budget page. Our contact information is there. You could share questions and feedback. We're available. Final slide here is just those key dates for the public. All those dates are on the override page. We have the budget hearing, again, where we are going to work to finalize not just the balanced budget this month, but also have the alternative override budget, have those available for presentation to the Select Board, the Finance Committee, the School Committee, where we'll seek your recommendations on them on the 29th.
Where is that going to be?
That will be at the Oliver Ames High School Auditorium.
Okay.
Again, to be sorted out this week, we will schedule a third and final PACE open house. So that's another great way, a little bit less formal than a hearing, if that's not your thing, to come learn, speak directly to the department heads, speak to your neighbors who are on pace and get some good information. And then there's 2 dates, again, whether folks intend to vote to support or to reject an override. There are 2 dates for that. That is Monday, May 19th, 7 o'clock for the annual town meeting. That's at Oliver Ames High School. And then Tuesday, June 10th, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., there's a special town election for the override at Oliver Ames High School. So
People can vote by mail?
they can vote by mail. It is on your agenda tonight to consider whether you will also schedule a day of early voting in person for that. And depending on how you land on that, we'll update our resources. And yes, anyone who has any questions, there's a lot of elections this spring, so it can feel kind of overwhelming. The annual town election is in a few weeks. There is a special state primary in May. There is a town meeting in May. There's a special state election in June and an override in June. All of that information you can get at our central voter page, which is easton.ma.us/vote. And that has all the resources you need. Or you could speak with the clerk's office and they'll help you out.
And to have an override be successfully a yes, you have to vote, town meeting has to vote yes, and the ballot has to vote yes.
That's correct. If it's approved at one but not both, it still fails.
So that's because when you vote for the ballot, you're voting to raise the funds.
That's right.
You're voting for the money. Town meeting is voting to appropriate the money. So
Right.
you have to have both of those.
So again, these are going to be hard choices. It'll be personal for every single voter. But I hope that some folks see this and that they're willing to spend some time looking at this information, contacting us, going to open houses, going to office hours, and reviewing the facts so they can feel comfortable making the right choice for themselves and their family. So I'm happy to answer any questions from the board.
All right, we'll start with you, Jamie.
Will you, Connor, just go back to the slide one more time that shows our comps to the other communities and what we spend in comparison?
I don't know if I had the total spend. Are you talking
No,
about?
I'm talking about just a comparable, how much less we spend than our comparable communities
Sure.
based on
Yep.
departments.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. Sorry.
That's a couple more back. This is a powerful slide, so just ask everyone. I don't know if we have anyone tonight in the audience with some questions. Great if we do. And for all of those of us who have volunteered to be out there and answer questions, get in front of people, just starting with this, it's such a great place to begin because I think it takes a lot of people kind of off. You know, if you're on edge about what's going on, this is just a great place to kind of level set the field. And we can talk about where we build from here. Because we talk about cuts that haven't happened yet and how much less we spend by department compared to a lot of communities that I think do well with their budgets too. But are they, you know, do we run efficiently and have we? Yes, for 19 years, we certainly have. And we've known this was coming. We'll go back to 17, the last time we tried to pass 16-17. So this is where I ask everyone to start, and please bring your questions from here, because if you see this, you understand this, you're willing to digest this, and then there's thousands of pages and hours of work behind all of this, but what a great place to first learn and get a great spin up if you're just now getting involved.
I would say, when you say we knew this was coming, we've been talking for years about we're going to get there someday. We're getting closer and closer. It's getting harder and harder to close that gap. But I would say, I don't think anybody had the expectation that it was going to be so drastic this year. We never dreamed that this was going to be the year it was going to happen. We knew it was going to be a tough budget year, but certainly didn't expect our costs to go up and escalate at the rate that they did for this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Both, and that sounds like we're trying to be, I think, maybe tricky with the public, but both things can be true. We can know that at some point this bill is coming due because the revenue trend is just not sustainable, right? I think Jamie's right, and Dottie, I think you're also right but what's different is the severity. And that's true, right? You know, there are folks who will say, well, gee, we went through with Blanche James, we went through with a building project. The first inclination that things were really abnormally different didn't even happen until going into the new year of 2024, after all of those votes, after years of public process, setting aside the 2013 vote to fund a building replacement program, which was getting wind that healthcare might be going up 10%, which again, we had saved money. We had avoided millions in costs by being in the GIC. That had been actually one of the things that contributed to us going so long without an override, ironically. And so it's really from about January of 24, which is 16 months ago, that these cost trends just started going not just in the wrong direction, but catastrophically in the wrong direction and uniformly in the wrong direction. I believe my first budget presentation last winter was that we have certain dynamics that are hard every year. Maybe you have a bad snow and ice budget one year, or you have a bad healthcare year, or a bad pension assessment, or a bad property or regional. And what was different last year was it was all of it. And then what's different now is it's all of it, but even worse, again, back to back. And so we knew at some point, because it's sort of like saying we know there will be a recession at some point, right? These things are cyclically baked into the way that the economics of municipal government works in Massachusetts. Overrides are in the law for a reason. Because when Prop 2.5 was passed, no one expected, even the more, I would say, conservative movement to adopt it, expected that 2.5 a year would just be good forever. Of course it's not, right? But so yes, we knew that at some point, being minimum aid would catch up with us. And to Dottie's point, it's the severity of those costs. When you're running so lean and you get hit really hard, it hurts, right? It goes straight into the bone, which is something that we knew and did warn. But you don't get 5 years warning or 5-year notice from your health insurance provider, just as no one in their personal life does, right? You usually find out roughly when they're saying, and it's due in 90 days.
Anything else, Jamie?
No, thank you.
Jen?
I have one question, and then I scribbled a lot of notes that I want to speak to. The first question is, how much confidence do you have around the items that are still outlying? I know you use kind of a best estimate in your budget, but I would assume there's really nothing in that list that was a huge concern, but just kind of giving a little bit of...
Yeah, the outstanding items.
Yeah.
I don't, so again, I reserve space for the school committee to make their final choice on the school budget, but the fixed cost swings, I think both will be in a positive direction, but I think you're talking maybe low 6 figures.
Okay.
It's not going to fundamentally change the picture. And on the state revenue side, optimistic scenario, maybe the House and Senate go to $100 minimum aid instead of the governor's proposed $75, but I think that's a difference of maybe $100,000 or $200,000.
Okay.
Pessimistic scenario, because the state's obviously worried about its finances and everyone is collectively worried about federal funding instability. If that actually drops to the statutory minimum of 30, that's another 6-figure loss. So good question, but I don't think it's not going to be a dramatic shift. I put it there more as a kind of CYA, frankly, for myself for a month from now when someone says, why is that different?
No, I appreciate the honing in and the transparency around that. So some of the comments I had jotted down, to your point, Dottie, you raised a second ago. I joined the Finance Committee in 2018, and this topic was front and center back then. Not to this degree, but we were in discussion about how the situation was unsustainable. And I even remember being in the joint presentation as a member of the Budget Subcommittee and Finance Committee, presenting to the Select Board and Finance Committee about the state of things and how we were on the edge of danger. And then we all know what happened less than a year later is COVID. And COVID gave us a little bit of, it was unknown and scary. And then it also gave us kind of kicking the can down the road moment, for better or worse. This past March, when you presented the budget, my reaction was, and it verbatim was, I'm shocked but not surprised. And that is, I think it's stuck with me since then, that I think covers it perfectly in 3 words. Nothing about our situation is surprising, but it is absolutely shocking to the degree that we're seeing these numbers and feeling this impact. And I know we're all feeling it in our personal lives too. Every time I open a bill, I'm terrified. Some of my bills have gone up 20, 30%. It's mind-blowing. So this is not unique to municipal government. It's happening all over the place, and it's just the way things are right now. It doesn't mean someone messed up and bad things are happening that people are doing on purpose. It's just the state of affairs. And I don't like paying more taxes more than anybody else, because we all pay taxes up here. So it's going to affect every single one of us. But when I think about the other side of things, and again, this is, my perspective, we're going to be in another rough year if we don't find solutions. And I think we're running out of creative options that will really push the needle in significant ways. I really, really am not comfortable with the use of stabilization funds. We have worked very, very hard to get that ourselves in a favorable position with that.
Right.
And that was part of our financial principles, and I've been very proud of how we've handled that. So using this much money and then the potential of what happens in another year, we're running out of runway here.
Right.
And regardless of the outcome with the override, whatever people vote, I understand that people have to vote based on what their situation is and the information they have. But I just beg people to please bring your ideas year round and all the time, not just your frustration when we hit these hard points. We're talking about this year round, and it just gets a lot of attention at certain points. Right. But at any point in time, folks can reach out with an email or come to a meeting or come to any of the subcommittee meetings that relate to things that are going on where you can make a difference. Ideas help, and we can't know everything. And I just want to remind folks to please look at resources and reach out with questions. And I've been talking to a lot of folks out in the world, and I get a lot of folks saying, but this thing shouldn't be cut or that thing shouldn't be cut. And the comment I make, and I'll say it here, is that a municipal budget is a representation of the needs, mandates, and other things that go to create a holistic picture of what the community, it's not just about what any one of us needs, and what any of us needs changes over time. Several years ago, my family was relying more on fire and emergency care. And, I have kids in the school. It changes for all of us, but it's a complete picture. So we can't cherry pick the things we all want to rise to the top and be saved when we have to look at the big picture overall. And I believe that, the town department heads, leaders at the school have done a really strong job of going deep and making really difficult decisions that none of us are happy about. It's going to be really difficult no matter what. And, I just want to thank folks who have been involved in this process and thank PACE, because they've been doing the hard work and keeping us informed. And, there's just no way to say it. It's terrible.
Appreciate that, Jen. I want to build on something that has come up, which is that we were starting to dial in a conversation about this right before the pandemic hit. And in a strange way, COVID gave some extension on the runway here. But I think sometimes when we say that, folks think, oh yeah, well, you had all that money and you used all one-time money for staff, which is also not true. One of the ways that we made it this many years after COVID was we cut 21 jobs when COVID hit, right? So we cut down to a very low baseline. And the timing of other long planned efforts like dissolving local dispatch and going to SEMREC happened during the same window, which was part of those cuts. Not that those weren't real jobs and real people, right? Those were real impacts. But I think the school budget maybe went up 0.5 that year. The town budget went actually backwards. So it wasn't as if we skated because we just took the same cost pattern, had a pandemic hit, didn't change anything, and just kept spending.
Right.
We cut to a really low baseline. And the conclusion of my message that year was that we as a community need to decide that if a revenue deficit we've had before the pandemic, which will be significantly exacerbated by it, if continuing to outrun and override forever is worth the cost of chronically underfunding our departments and education. So I just want to make that point as well, that when folks, because you see in the press, there are some places that they've hired hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people with grants. We didn't do that.
Right.
That wouldn't have been a call that I would support, not to criticize another community. We cut jobs going into COVID. And then we did. We built back from there, but incrementally. And we had worked with Budget Subcommittee to identify a multi-year drawdown plan on local reserves as revenue replacement from the federal government came offline. And had cost patterns been anywhere in the ballpark of what had been typical, that plan would have worked. We still would have needed an override at some point, but we probably would have got another few years.
Yeah, it's almost one of the reasons that when I see Pace's slides, I actually don't like the end of COVID money thing, because it almost implies that we had this extra source of money that was, we were swimming in funds and having fun with it. That is not the case at all.
Correct.
So, and you just clarified why. And I remember when we were talking about how that funding was being used and looking at how other communities were using it, and they were using it for things that we said those were bad practices in terms of our financial principles, and we weren't going to do it.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think the total deficit we face next year, I think the net impact of ARPA and ESSER expiration is maybe 1/10.
yep.
The overwhelming contributor is for healthcare and fixed cost growth.
Yeah. And I think people need to understand that more. I think that almost should go,
Sure.
yeah.
Thank you.
It's difficult to add anything that hasn't already been said. You guys kind of took everything, but I will, my 2 cents in, I think when things aren't going the way people want to see things go, they have to blame somebody or something. They have to point a finger. There has to be somebody who caused it. And you've all said it. There's not a person that caused this. There's not a department that caused this. We did see it coming, to Jamie's point, but we didn't see how fast it was coming, to your point, or at least in the past couple of years. We didn't see that outrageous cliff. People have a lot of questions, or perhaps before they have questions, they have blame, and I would encourage people to ask questions, because the answers are all here. Jamie, to your point, that slide was fantastic, but this whole presentation, it's pretty succinct comparatively to other presentations. It removes doubt as to why this is happening, and I think people really need to ask those questions, become educated on what is going on and what their options are, and that things do change. Prices do change. 20% in 2 years is astronomical, but things are going to change, and if there isn't an override this spring, at some point there will be an override in the future. It's going to happen. It's going to have to happen.
Or this is what every year looks like.
Or this is what every year looks like.
Which I think is important.
It's unfortunate because, I've had a lot of conversations with people in the community, and if you talk to somebody who's a little bit older in the community, I've talked to family members, and I said, when did you buy your house? 1980. How much did you pay for it? And then they get excited because now they're proud of the deal that they got. And it's $50,000. And I said, well, what are your taxes? $900. So, well, your house is worth $600. That's more than a 10 times increase. And your taxes went up maybe like 8 times. Things are going to change, and things are going to cost more. It's the world we live in. There's no undoing that. And then there are other people where they're very proud of the community that we live in, and they're proud of the community it once was, and they want things to be frozen in time. And I love that conversation as well. And I'll often speak to somebody and I'll say, what year did you graduate from high school? They say 1975. I said, well, it's 2025. It was 50 years ago. Have things changed in those 50 years? And they'll say, oh my God, yes, of course they've changed. And they go on and on. I said, well, in 1975, did things change from 1925? And then they, wait a minute, I see what's happening here. It's like, well, things change. It's not a gotcha moment, but it's things change. And if your community is not changing with those times, then it's going to suffer. You can't stay still. And I want more people, I want more conversations like that, open conversations, questions to be asked. But this isn't anyone's fault. This is the environment that we live in. And we're faced with solving it and presenting to the community the options to solve that, to make a choice. What type of community do you want to live in? It's that simple. That's it.
Thanks, Mark. Well said.
Very well said.
Greg?
I'm not sure I have much else to add to what the three of you have already said, but I do want to point out a couple of things. In 2017, when the audit was done, it pointed out that we were not overspending, we were not adding people. We were not, the problem wasn't overspending, it was lack of revenue. That was in 2017. Now, fast forward to 2025, the same issue is here. It's not changed. I remember the budget subcommittee discussions when I believe that Tom was the chair at the time, and there was a discussion about the fact that we were going to need an override, and then the pandemic hit, and we put that on hold. I think that one point that you make, Mark, about how people have to blame somebody, I was more than a little concerned about the way the volunteer school committee and the superintendent of the schools were treated last Thursday by some members of the audience. And in part, some of the questions or concerns that were expressed were based on inadequate information. Right, to remind people that all these boards and committees, school, finance, select board, we're all volunteers. We all live in this town, we all pay taxes. So yes, we are keenly aware and concerned about the people in this community that are struggling. I say it all the time when you drive on Monday afternoon by the church on 106 and see the number of people parked there waiting for the food pantry. This is Easton, and yet there's 140 families or 150 families or whatever the number that Ken always brings to us. So there are people that are struggling, and yet we have made opportunities available to people, whether it's taxation aid or it's through the assessor's office or it's through the circuit breaker that we got passed by the legislature. We're trying to make up for some of those difficulties. It doesn't necessarily meet everybody's needs, but at least it's the attempt to make whole some people. And I encourage people to look at the PACE material, not to blame anybody. Just look at the PACE material, ask the questions, as Mark said. I think it's very important to get the information before you make that decision. And obviously, it's your own decision. You have to decide whether you're going to support the override or you're not going to support the override. But I think it's important to have that information before you make those decisions. And one of the slides, this is not just an Easton problem. The Boston Globe had a thing the other day about Milton and Brookline, two wealthy communities that are going for overrides because they're struggling. So it's not. It's 46 attempts for an override since the beginning of the fiscal year versus 62 in the entire year last year. That's significant. And I hope that people, before they blame people, that they take the time to review the PACE material. As Mark indicated, we all are out in the community. We all get questions. I encourage the questions, but in a respectful manner. And it, as Jen said, this impacts all of us. All of us. So, thank you.
So a couple of the notes that I wrote down, I wanted to, we talk this over and over and over and over again, and every time we have a new audience. So I do want to remind people that the PACE committee makeup has representatives from the teachers union, the police union, the fire union. It has a number of residents that we appointed, and we appointed residents at their interview that said that they were going to ask hard questions and that they weren't necessarily on board with the way things were happening. And we picked them on purpose so that we would get challenged, hear new ideas. And so this group collectively, first of all, worked together to say, do we have a problem? And everybody unanimously agreed on that. And then it was, what is the size of the problem? And we were all within a very, very small amount of each other, and we picked that average. And then, what is your solution to the problem? And we went around, and it ranged from 100% override to 80% override, 20% cuts, but all like kind of in the same range. Unanimous from all of the people in that group, from unions, from teachers, from retired teacher. Nancy, the vice chair, is a retired teacher. Tom is an expert in his world of finance. All these people came together. So that's the kind of work that was done to get to that. One of the things that Tom talked about in that he really wove this thread through the whole thing that I do want to remind people, we're talking about people, and we're talking about their livelihood, and we're talking about their positions. We're talking about people that we value, that we've worked with, that do an amazing job for this town, that potentially will be losing their job, and also live in this town, many of them. And I feel like we need to be thoughtful about how we look at this and how we talk about this. When we say we're lean and we do more with less, I hate that phrase now. Like, it just really bothers me, because what it really means is we're overtaxing our staff to do work that we don't have enough people to do. And when I see, and I know personally firsthand after all these years, the people ranging from Connor to Sean to Elizabeth to Wendy to our department heads across the board and our teachers, they're all working more hours trying to get the job done. And we're expecting more and more and more. So it's just, that part is not sustainable. It's not fair. And thankfully, we have people that really love their jobs and love working in Easton, but we can't go on like that forever. So I want to say that even, through contract negotiations and union negotiations, we've had a really good relationship with our unions on the town side. And I want to thank the union members that have risen to the occasion when we needed them to take a certain percentage or a 1-year extension or things like that. It helps us. I hope they see that we value them and their work, this whole board and the administration. So I just wanted to underscore that. The other thing, some of the things that we've done, and so, when we talk about what we've done recently, so we had the Blanche Ames School, that came in under budget. People I hear are talking about when that gets on our tax rolls. That's been on our tax rolls for 2 years. We thought it was going to be about $400 for an average home. It ended up being about $285. And that same year, the amount of money that we saved residents and taxpayers that used our municipal aggregation was higher than that amount. So it was really kind of a wash on that. And I'm not trying to say that lightly, but we are doing things to try to mitigate. We know that it's going up here. We're trying to help it go down there. We also voted this year and last year to do a tax shift, to put a little bit more of the burden on our businesses and take a little bit of relief on the residents. That's really unheard of for a community our size with our business and town makeup. And we have to be gentle with those things, because we also don't want to, make our businesses leave Easton because they can't afford to be here. And I think that we've done a very thoughtful job about valuing and appreciating our businesses, and also trying to see what we could do to give a little bit of relief to our residents. And then other programs that we've done, like Craig was talking about, for different tax relief, and reaching out to people personally with our navigator in the Health and Community Services to talk to residents and say, what are you struggling with? How can we get you some services? Maybe they got pointed to, not tax relief, but rate relief for electric for certain income brackets, or some other services that people use. We have somebody that is there to help them. I'm not sure that everybody knows that. And I'm not sure that everybody knows where to find on the website what those services are. But if you talk to Health and Community Services, they have all that information there. The other thing is that do we have a tax calculator yet online, or is that's going to be coming?
We will shortly.
Some people have told me that they've been using the tax calculator, and I'm like, what tax calculator?
It's probably an old one buried on a website from either 10 years ago or Blanche Ames, where none of those numbers will make sense because it's based on property values from pre-COVID. So it's probably going to give them some pretty scary numbers.
A generic override calculator as well, so they might be using that.
So as we move along, we'll have those numbers refined, and they might make a little bit more sense.
Yes.
We did come in almost $9 million under budget on the original bids for the municipal buildings. We're trending in the right direction on that. I hate to jinx us, and I want to knock on wood when I say this, but we have a good track record of coming in under budget. We're about $12 million under budget on the sewer for Depot. We're getting grants to make these things happen. We got over $10 million in state and federal grants to pave Depot Street all the way from Five Corners up to 138. We've done amazing things with the limited amount of money that we have. And the other day, Craig and I had a interview with Dave Clifton and Brian Hoffman talking about the tricentennial. And like, there's a lot of stress going on. There's a lot of stress on us. There's a lot of stress on our residents, not just this stuff, but national stuff, you know, costs rising in our daily budget. And that hour that we spent with them was like the happiest hour that I've had for a while, because we spent the time talking about how awesome Easton is and all the great things that we have. And I feel like people, you know, think about that a little bit. Don't forget and lose sight of the fact that we live in a great community with an amazing school system, with amazing employees, great places, things to do, historical buildings, the cultural district, all the fun things they do, the community that came together to run the tricentennial with all volunteer donations, almost $400,000 that the community donated, not a tax dollar in there. So, like, I just want to hopefully ask people to kind of just keep all of this in perspective when we're working together. It's not pleasant for anybody. I want to thank the school committee and the superintendent and her staff for the work that they put into this budget. They've had some really tough budget meetings, like Connor said. And, you know, people are certainly emotionally charged about these issues, but I would ask people to really, like everybody has said, ask questions, email the board. We'll answer your questions, we'll email it back. Connor's made himself available. Tom and Nancy have made themselves available from PACE. We're gonna have another open house. All our department heads have made themselves available at these and just in their regular day-to-day jobs. So let's just put in a little bit of, you know, collaboration with everyone, and you know, hopefully people show up at town meeting and it's not the first time they heard there's a challenge. I think we've put in hours and hours and hours of different programs for people to be notified, and if you have to start somewhere, just go on the PACE website and start with the frequently asked questions. It's a great place to start.
Can I say one more thing, Dottie?
Sure.
We were talking about the human element of it. I think it's important. I think we all touched on it, but to really call it out. The other night when we were at the school committee meeting, Dr. Cabral made a comment during the slide of the 44 reductions and recalibrations and whatnot, that every single one of those roles was intentional. And that was really powerful to me, because it wasn't that we, you know, are thinking about, sometimes you look at the numbers, it feels very non-human, right? And you kind of lose sight of the fact that those represent people and their livelihood, like you said. When she made that point about being intentional, you know, just I wanted to call and thank them for their contributions to the community, first of all, but just remind folks that they've all contributed. Their positions going away doesn't mean they haven't, and that their work doesn't go away. It gets picked up by other people who are teaching the larger classes or having to pick up extra responsibilities. So, you know, that's just, I wanted to call that out.
Excellent. All right.
Thank you both, Dottie and Jen. They're just great summaries for everybody.
Yeah. Dottie, we do have one question online. It's from Stephen Nikolowski on 18 Boundary Street. We've heard that since 2016, when the override was defeated, our number of employees have gone down, and now we are still in a budget deficit for fiscal year 2026. What changes could have been made from a town policy perspective to have kept us out of an override situation? Shouldn't we stop trying to compare ourselves to other communities? Towns are like people; they are unique and vary individually.
Sure. So those are good questions. So when the override failed in 2016, there was a series. Some of it happened prior, some was immediately after. There was a series of financial policies that the town did adopt, whether that's a fund balance policy or our financial management guidelines, that put quantitative benchmarks on what we ought to be doing to fortify our financial position. And that included reducing the free cash reliance in the budget. It included building up our stabilization funds so that we could have more insulation against market shocks. And we actually accomplished a lot of those, and we're going to talk a bit more about those in some of the later items. That's fair. Every community is unique. I think benchmarking is a pretty standard practice in almost every business and industry. No one town is totally apples to apples, and that's why it's important that you don't rely on just one data set. That was something that Pace spent a lot of time with. Because that was a fair question of like, okay, as we start, and if you take that peer group from the operational audit, which was funded by voters in the wake of a failed override, right? In part looking at, well, how do we get here? If you take that same group over time, you'll see that the disparity in spend in Easton is actually growing. And so it's a fair question to ask, like, does that even make sense to use that group? And so Pace did look at different groups. He looked at it from different perspectives on, well, maybe we shouldn't use folks based on personal income statistics. Maybe we should do it based on the land portfolio, so to speak, right? There's a lot of things where we are comparable to Dedham economically, but certainly we don't have the commercial base, right? So that's a fair criticism or assessment of that benchmarking. And so you could say, okay, well, let's take communities that have similar residential to commercial splits to Easton. And when you do that, and you find the same thing, which is that we spend less than them too. So fair, I think, no, every community is unique like an individual, but when you see broadly that those trends remain largely the same, whether you pick neighbors, whether you pick economic comps, whether you pick real estate-based comps, and in some cases, like with our general government spending, you could look at the entire state and we're at the very, very bottom. That's important information to consider. As far as what could the town do from a policy perspective to avoid ever needing an override, in my professional judgment, I think that's impossible. So unless from a community perspective, that was adopted as a matter of policy of never having an override is issue number one. That's doable. I feel very strongly, and our work shows, to do that forever in a community with our makeup without substantial cuts to services is not possible. And that's why that ultimately ends up being a community choice. The town can put an override to voters, but it can't force one. And so if voters feel that remains priority one is to not have those overrides, then they will demonstrate so through the ballot box. And we will we'll keep budgeting accordingly. But I outside of putting, delaying an override ahead of every other public good in front of public education, public safety, public health, in a community like Easton, and frankly, like most communities, that would be an extreme anomaly to just never have overrides. And Easton has gone incredibly long. We've gone 19 years, so we've had a really good run. So I suppose a select board could adopt as a matter of policy and direct the town administrator, we never want you to put a budget forward that, whether it has an override or you could pursue an underride. Underrides exist. They're exceptionally rare, but communities can vote to actually cut the tax levy. So that's a choice.
Yes, we could do that, but what that means is, I've gotten calls on a Friday, I've gotten calls on a Monday or an email on a Monday from somebody that called a department Friday afternoon late in the day that was upset that they didn't get an answer, and it's 9 o'clock Monday morning. So the amount of services that people expect and the exceptional level of services that people expect, when we have a snowstorm, they want their street plowed immediately. When we have a windstorm and trees are down, they want the DPW out there immediately to pick those up. So if we don't have enough staff, people are going to have to learn that immediately might be a few days. That's just, there's only so much that you can do. If we can only raise taxes 2.5% per year, the only other tools that we have to be able to raise revenue are new growth or raise fees. We are looking at tweaking all of those things as well. And also to bring in new business. But when we bring in new business, that's a challenge also. We had an opportunity to bring in not a retail marijuana that failed, but also a cultivation center that would have brought in tax revenue. That failed. When we say that we're going to bring in certain businesses, there's always a group of people that don't want whatever kind of business it is. The only time that we heard a lot of enthusiasm about Taco Bell and Chipotle are when we spoke to the 6th graders, or the 8th graders, I'm sorry, a couple of weeks ago, and they cheered that Taco Bell was coming in. And, we have to have support. We're doing what we hear from the community and what the community says they value. The community says they value education. So we need to have the appropriate amount of teachers and administrators to manage those teachers. You can't have a school system that doesn't have vice principals, that doesn't have, the staff to do the work. You can't have a police department. We have 4 police on duty right now, 4 police for a town this size. If we have to cut back on that and we don't have 4 police out there, that's dangerous, not just for us as residents, it's dangerous for our staff. The same thing with the fire. If we have to go down to 1 ambulance and you're on the other side of town from where that ambulance is and you need a call, you're going to have to get service from another community. That's a delayed response. So we can make all kinds of changes around and more cuts and everything else, which is the budget that's going to have the cuts in it.
Right.
And
Voters
that's the
will have
choice
that
people
choice.
have. So
Right.
what can you do to not have an override? We can put forth a budget like we're going to put forth that's a balanced budget, right?
If I could add to that, so we live in a community that is a reflection of the people who live in this community. Everything we have is what they want because they literally approve it. They vote on it, town meeting every year. That tells me everything that you have is because of the community you live in and their wants. It is literally democracy. So we're carrying out the will of the community. But to your point, Connor, a world where an override doesn't exist, that world doesn't exist when things are going up 20% a year or over the course of a couple of years. That there's a reason why that's built in. That mechanism is there because of that.
Right, because even the architects of Prop 2.5
Yeah.
recognize that. One last thing I would like to add is, and we'll talk more about this during my performance review, but this will be my 9th operating budget that I'm presenting to town meeting. In the 8 annual budgets that I've presented to town meeting, at 4 of those town meetings, voters have attempted to amend the budget. All 4 times were to increase spending. All 4 times.
Thank you for saying that.
All 4 times, I advocated against that, not because I didn't agree that I wanted to see more funding for education, not because I didn't agree that I wanted to see more police working for Easton, but because I was adhering to exactly those policies, which set out goals to build our reserves, which we have, which have quadrupled in my tenure. And had they not, the number of job losses next year would have 3 digits. So it's a hard balance, and it's not one that any of us take lightly. But at the end of the day, to Mark's point, every single budget has gone through town meeting. We've had some tough town meetings when we had lean budgets, but the direction that folks have expressed themselves has been that they want to see more support for the schools and for educators and for the arts, but more support for our police or our firefighters or our public employees. And we've had to have some really difficult debates, and to the credit of the voters in many, many cases, I remember one, I think probably in 2019, when there was a tight school budget that year and there was some negative impacts to music. And folks organized, as is their right. Town meeting had, I think, 600+ folks. They were ready to go. They had an amendment to increase spending, and then they ultimately didn't approve their own amendment because we had a very good conversation about, at that time, where our reserves were and how limited they were and how important it was that we can recognize that both things are true, that we want to invest in our schools and we want to have good education, but we also need to exercise a really tight operation here because of the revenue dynamics that we have.
Connor, just last piece, because it goes right to the question, is what policy, what could we have done differently? Well, let's talk about what we did do, and you guys have touched on a lot of it, but there's agreements we're entering into today, like that of with Brockton, to gain capacity with their wastewater treatment, to be able to open up an industrial park in Easton to new businesses, and the ability to alleviate failing septics in more areas of town, like we've done at Five Corners, like we've done at Quissit. So you've got all these, great things that have been being done. So please come out and ask these great questions.
That's a good question.
Come grab us, and we'll talk about all the policy that's been being driven for the last 15 years to, get us to a better spot on the revenue side. So thank you.
Our job being elected as representatives of the community is to have the pulse of the community and understand what they want. And that's what we put those values into a budget when we prepare it and we bring it to town meeting. And ultimately, town meeting is the group that approves that budget. So the select board isn't spending the money. We're proposing it, but the town is actually telling us what they want us to spend the money on. So I think that we've done exceptional. I think we'll talk about it in Connor's review. Over the years, we've been a very conservative board, all of us, really looking at the costs of everything and trying to find creative ways to keep those in check and keep them in pace. And I stand behind that. So, anybody else? All right.
Sean, that was it for questions.
Is there any more?
Nope.
Okay, excellent. All right, so the next item that we have, we're going to go right to, we're going to skip to item 12, and so that's the town administrator's fiscal 2025 performance evaluation. So just for people at home, and as we know, after the annual election, if, when the boards change, if they change, one of the first things that they do is set goals for the town administrator for the next year. And so this board set those goals for next year. So that's why this board will evaluate how Connor performed against those goals. And those goals are, Connor and everybody that reports to Connor across the board. So we have 11 sections, and I just want to go through them. I think I want to spend a little bit more time on these than we normally do. Each select board member answers, so Connor does a self-assessment. There's a summary of that, and then each select board member also makes their comment. So the first one is finance. So Connor's self-assessment was exceeds expectations, and there's a long narrative in here.
Yeah. Could I, or I don't know, if there's a order you want to go in?
Sure, if you want to talk about it, I was going to highlight, the bullet points of what you've done, but why don't you set us up with the narrative on that?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm not going to read the whole thing on every category, but because this one is first, and because it's in such focus, I do want to speak a little bit to it. And frankly, it makes me uncomfortable to do so. We normally do these, although they're public, it's pretty routine business. My goals are voted on publicly. They are on the town's website. They're discussed publicly. They're in the town's budget. My evaluations are public. They're also available online. And, folks don't work in public service because they want to take credit, right? So I wanted to put that out there before I don't view any of this as taking credit for myself, but talking about what we've been able to do together. So the first thing I want to say is some of what we said talking about the budget is that we're very fortunate here to have the team of people that we have here, which is not just represented in this room with our elected leadership, but also our department heads who we enjoy a very high retention rate with. Many of them have been with the town for years, if not decades. They are leaders, not just here, but in their fields. They're respected by their peers. They are on state, regional, and often national policy boards for things ranging from elections to health, public health policy, public works. They run very lean departments with great staff. Dottie, I really appreciate you highlighting and thanking our unions. We have a really good relationship with our unions. We work very hard with them, and they work very hard for us, and we're appreciative of them. And I think that they care very much about not just their jobs, but about this community. Many of them live here. Many of them who don't grew up here, and even those who don't often spend a lot more time here than perhaps where they sleep at night. We have really amazing citizens here in Easton on so many of our boards and committees. One of the questions that comes up with tight budgets is, well, do you have people volunteering? We actually rely on multiple hundred volunteers every single year, whether the budget's good or not, on our planning board, our Concom, our historical commission, school committee, on so many different boards, zoning board of appeals, human rights committee, ranging from important community-based groups to discharging really significant regulatory roles, adjudicatory roles, and donating their time, the tricentennial, of course. So those folks go above and beyond, and it's great that we have them. And I do want to specifically call out and thank Sean and Liz. I think sometimes folks think that we might have like a really large team here, but this is actually it. This is the entire elected leadership and then entire staff for the executive management of the town. And Sean and Elizabeth are excellent, and it is a demanding workplace, and they meet that every single day and have a great attitude, and they help me be able to do my job in serving you. So I appreciate them. This January started my 9th year as town administrator in Easton. It's my 14th year working for this community. It's been a really incredible journey, and although this has been a hard year, I remain appreciative that I get to be a part of it, and I appreciate working with this board. In talking about the town's financial management, my goals, there's particular objectives, and so I have to say those are being met or in progress, but I wanted to go through the detail and then talk about what we have done in the past 9 or 10 years together, because it matters, and I hope that if anyone is watching that, perhaps if some of this is new, that's good information. So we're heading into, as we've talked about quite a bit, one of the hardest budget cycles in years in Easton, where voters are going to be considering an operating override for the first time since 2016. Our financial management is being assessed, it's being scrutinized. The consideration of a tax increase is obviously a very significant one, and voters have every right to be discerning and to want to know the hows and the whys of considering one. However, to periodically consider an override, which we have not passed in 19 years, does not mean that public finances have not been managed appropriately. To the contrary, that Easton has managed to deliver a high quality of services despite its well-documented revenue challenges for those 19 years without an override is indicative of the opposite of strong financial management and conservative budgeting. And so I think putting some specifics on that is worth doing. When I became the town administrator in January of 2017, Easton was reeling from a failed operating override and a leadership transition. And at that time, our stabilization fund had been depleted to a balance of only $1.7 million, and the operational audit was underway to assess our financial management practices. That audit came back showing what's since been demonstrated innumerable times by internal benchmarking, external reviews, and that's, wrote this phrase before you told me that you hate it, but probably still would put it, so sorry, that we do more with less. We staff fewer positions across our departments. We spend fewer dollars per resident than most peers, and none of those run more lean, although technically all the departments report to my position. Obviously, Director Field is managing the day-to-day of Public Works. But the general government that I lead spends less than half of what our peer and neighbor communities do per capita. We spend near the bottom of all 351 cities and towns in the entire state. And I don't say that as a point of pride. That has been deliberate because we have not had a revenue sufficient to meet our public safety, our public works, and our public education needs. But I think that that's really important. That if the perspective is that we want to see a tight-fisted town manager who is running a tight ship, I don't know what other statistic you could look at and what conclusion you could come from that says that I have somehow not very tightly managed the public dollar, particularly in this bill. Our own department embodies this. We are staffed by 3, counting myself, which is about half what town administration is typically staffed in communities of similar sizes. Despite being a minimum aid community entitled to $30 per student of new Chapter 70 funding per year, in a town where nearly a third of our land is minimally taxable, we have, since the 2016 override failed, strengthened our financial policies. We've adopted years of conservative operating budgets. We have massively increased our reserve balances. We've achieved the best new growth in Easton ever. And we've executed on generational essential infrastructure investments that will position this community to thrive for the rest of this century, long after we're all gone. We've done so by overperforming on grants and making strategic decisions about infrastructure and capital investments to catalyze new tax growth and new business investment. We've taken advantage of opportunities for regional collaboration. We've consolidated internal departments to find efficiencies rather than siloing. We've fostered a can-do culture here where we do more with less and take pride in our work serving the public. We've done things like SEMREC, where we regionalized 911 for 4 communities and saved Easton millions of dollars in the process to provide a better service. So despite the coming year posing extremely difficult choices for our community, had we not made good choices along the way and exceptional progress in those 9 years, what we'd be facing would be substantially worse. In those 9 years, since 2017, as I've said, we quadrupled our stabilization fund balance from 1.7 to over 7 million. That's the highest it's ever been. Our reserve fund ratio doubled from 5 to 10% for the first time on record, and is the highest in real dollar and percentage terms it's been in 20 years. We've saved millions in operating spend by consolidating departments and regionalizing services like SEMRAC, which to this day costs fewer dollars, not even adjusting for inflation, to operate than we used to spend on local dispatch before the pandemic. We have won, along with the schools, who are an important partner in our success, more than $60 million in state and federal infrastructure and facilities grants to support the construction of new schools, municipal facilities, major roadway improvements, drainage improvements, water treatment plants, and sewer treatment plants. That does not count an additional $6 million in planning and strategic or local infrastructure programs that we have won in the past 5 years through planning and public works for things ranging from Lincoln Street sidewalks, wetland restoration for flood resiliency, master plans for the community. I think it's really important to point out, we do not have grant writing staff. For every $1 that we spend on operating funds for our planning department, who also manage the permitting for 8 separate citizen boards, Easton wins $3.40 in state and federal money. That is exceptional because they are exceptional, and I appreciate them. We've grown our capital and sewer reserves using mitigation funds negotiated by the select board with large developments. We've leveraged other mitigation funds combined with state grants to complete 3 sewer districts, which have contributed to Easton's new growth in '25 being $1.5 million, which is the strongest that it's ever been. Easton's average annual tax bill, Dottie made the point about sometimes folks saying when Blanche Ames comes onto their tax bill, it has been for years. Our average annual tax bill increase this decade from fiscal 16 to 25 is 3.5% a year, which is below the average of Massachusetts, which is 4% per year. Our average tax bill rank among the 351 communities in Massachusetts has dropped from 65th in 2021 to 79th today, which is the lowest it's been since 2006, just before the last override. Easton's fiscal 25 tax rate of $12.48 per thousand is the lowest since 2009. Our income growth has been strong. The average single-family tax bill as a percentage of income, which is 13.5%, is the lowest it's been as far back as State Department of Revenue data tracks that statistic. Commercial, industrial, and personal property growth have contributed significantly more to our new growth than they have in the past. Despite 88% of our property value coming from residential property, 32% of all new growth in Easton since 2021 has come from commercial, industrial, or personal property investment. This is something that we hear repeatedly that folks do want to see. They want to see our tax base grow. They want to see more business. None of this is to say mission accomplished and we don't need to keep working hard and doing more. We do. But those are important facts. Our town department operations have been run extraordinarily lean. They've yielded an average increase of 3.25% per year during my tenure. This is a major contributor to Easton's total spending being 17% below the average of the per capita community and in the bottom third of all cities and towns in Massachusetts. During my tenure, our budgets have won numerous national awards for their excellence in their transparency, distinction for our performance management. Our operations have received international awards for public safety excellence for SEMRAC and for our innovation. We've maintained a strong bond rating that was reaffirmed this spring, and were it not for the pending fiscal cliff caused by decades of minimum state funding and the 20% explosion to healthcare costs and other fixed costs that we don't have immediate control over, we would be positioned for a rating upgrade. Even in the face of our current challenges, we are continuing to find areas, or try our best to find areas where it's possible, whether through bargaining with our unions for extensions, or looking for opportunities on health insurance, or considering annual required contribution rates through town budgets, to continue to make progress for the community long term. Despite all that progress, it is also true that the growing cost of living poses an incredible hardship to some of our residents. We've recognized this. Easton has expanded its financial and tax relief programs significantly during my tenure to include programs like the Taxation Aid Committee and SERVS, which were not my idea. I am not taking credit for those. Members of the select board found these local options and brought them to the community, and our voters believed in them and did the right thing. But we did try and find ways to get creative with that. Those were initially going to be donation driven, and when ARPA came through, we put more than $400,000 of federal relief funds into those programs to put thousands of dollars in direct financial relief into the hands of seniors, veterans, their dependents, and individuals with disabilities during an incredibly hard financial time for them. We've expanded eligibility for statutory programs to reach more members of our vulnerable populations. And we've created our own programs through special legislation, such as the forthcoming fiscal 26 to 28 circuit breaker, to offset some of the cost of debt exclusions that our voters have so generously approved. Many of these programs have income or other means-tested qualifications and can leave some of those who are just over income standards behind. And that can be extremely frustrating and challenging for people's finances. And that's why we've also looked for ways to enact broad-based economic relief like bulk purchasing electricity supply for the community at a better rate than the market. And as of the end of 2024, our aggregation program has saved $13 million in energy supply for our residents and businesses compared to market rates, with the average home in Easton saving $1,870 between when that program started in November of 2020 and the end of last year. That's an annualized savings of $467, which is meaningfully greater than the $285 tax impact of Blanche James. That the above was accomplished without an override and without routine rounds of substantial job and program cuts is testament to steady, long-term focused financial leadership. As I've already said, this was not done by me alone. I'm certainly not taking credit for it alone. It is and remains a team effort between the town and the schools, our elected leaders, and our voters, who, as we just discussed, Mark, have at many town meetings had some pretty tough debates and hard budgets to choose, and more often than not supported policies and budgets to fortify our financial position, and I appreciate every one of them. Unknown at the time that our goals were adopted for financial management, of course, last April was the creation of PACE by town meeting. So that's obviously a large commitment. And I'm so impressed and so thankful of the residents on that committee in particular, ranging from folks who have been involved in town before and some who haven't, who have committed hundreds of hours of work. But that was, in addition to the Select Board, Finance Committee, and other groups we support. And our office has taken a good laboring oar there to help out. And we, I think, have risen to that challenge and served them well, whether that's helping with logistics or minutes and agendas. And so it's been great to be a part of that. But I think that we've really risen to that occasion. So I know that was very long. But I think that what we've all done together was important. I promise I will not do that on all 11 areas because we will never go home.
But I think that is important because the financial piece of what we're talking about is really driving a lot of the conversations right now, and I think it's important that people know that. When we talk about the budget, we've received that national award recognition for several years in a row now. That's something that's probably not going to happen if there's not an override. We won't be able to do that level of performance on producing the budget in the way those happen. There'll be a budget, it'll be out there, but it won't be to the extent of the detail that we're usually able to put in there. I'm just going to go around. If any, we have all. I'll just preface this. This whole report is going to go online, so people can look at it. They can see our exact comments. If we want to make brief comments, just to touch on each of these, I'll go around and ask everyone. Jamie had a really long.
Tough to make brief comments, but I'm glad you're telling me I don't need to read this. I just encourage people to read it. And really to read what Connor just read, because all I did is paraphrase most of what you just read, because I think it's important to reinforce this. I'll read the very last thing I wrote because it does spare people 10 minutes of their lives. A project that would have cost, so I was talking about, I think, Blanche James. I said, and we're talking about cost avoidance. And realizing the benefits for generations to come by combining 3 schools built in the 50s and 60s when our town population was 8,000 to 10,000 people and no longer capable of meeting our programmatic needs. A project that would have cost us nearly twice what we paid per square foot had we delayed just 3 or 4 years. Not to mention the risk of losing MSBA funding to the tune of $36 million. So I think the last line, what I can't emphasize enough is what great leadership does for sustainable Easton for years to come. Leave it at that.
Excellent. Jen?
So I will just focus on the fact that I've worked in like a space that involves finance and budget for most of my career. And when you're in the weeds of that, you understand how hard this work is and how challenging it can be when you're especially working in constrained resource times, periods of constrained resources. I believe that Connor, you, under the leadership, the rest of the team here in the town have just done a tremendous job of being transparent, of doing what's right with taxpayer resources that are limited, and communicating when we have problems. And I really appreciate that. And again, I know the delicate balance here. and all that comes into play with that. I'm just trying to make sure if I'm missing anything that I wanted to call out. I also, I ended my comments by saying that I think you have supported and nurtured an environment that is welcoming of new ideas and creativity, and I really appreciate that. So,
Thanks, Jen.
and I agree with everything you had in your self-assessment.
So my turn. Everything in your self-assessment was completely accurate. I'm not going to read what I wrote. I'm not going to belabor the point or go on too long, but all of your financial policies have allowed us to function exceptionally. In your leadership with your departments, their financial prudency. I argue that had the leadership in this town, led by you, this board, not done what we had done, we have, if you look at the projects that have happened, infrastructure projects, the school, the future public complex, the school, for example, if that were to be built today, it would cost, what, 50, 60 million more?
Yep.
Okay, so extrapolate that out 5 years, 10 years. You have to build a new school at some point. So if we had waited 5 years or 10 years, that number is astronomical. The public works facility, same thing. What we're paying for that now, it would be double or more in 10 years. Infrastructure build-outs, the sewer, in 3 districts and 4, God willing, for future economic development. That has cost us money, but it has saved us hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a real number, like almost close to $1 billion in future money. That's real. That's not hyperbolic. And those decisions, difficult at that time, were the best thing for this community, because now we won't be faced with those, $500 million school in 10 years, or $500 complex over here, or to put it in infrastructure that, on this day, years ago it cost this much, and now we have to do it, our backs against the wall, if we want that economic development. Those decisions have saved this community hundreds of millions of dollars. So I thank you for all you've done. I thank all of your departments for all they've done. And keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing it exactly right, and what we expect, and in exceeding expectations. So I know this has been a tough year, and you are your own worst critic. We all know that. I think it exceeds expectations across the board. We have no doubt that you're doing everything right.
You have done a remarkable job in leading this town in the way you handle the finances in this community. And I just want to read something that this fiscal year has been particularly stressful as we approach a fiscal cliff should the recommended operational override fail to achieve approval at town meeting in May, townwide vote in June. Connor has managed the town budget thoughtfully, despite Easton being a minimum aid community. State aid has not addressed inflation, and 1/3 of the town is not taxable. I think that what my colleagues have said, I concur completely. It has been, I know, a very difficult year this year, but it's been difficult from the very beginning. And I appreciate the efforts that you've put in, and I think you've exceeded my expectations.
So I just want to build off a little bit about what you said, Mark. The things that we have to take hard votes on, for instance, I'm going to use SEMREC, right? It hadn't been done around here. It was very controversial. How are people going to know how to find my street if this isn't going to be located in Easton? Technology-wise, how is this going to work? You're just trying to save money, but what about the services? And we did a lot of work on that, and we took that vote. That was a risky vote to take, right? And it turned out beyond our expectations, not only for the money, the financial savings, but also for the performance. I mean, they're doing just an exceptional job there as that first point of contact when we have an emergency. who knew that that was going to be the way it worked out, right? So you have to take a risk on some of these things, and you also have to do it, you have to recognize the opportunity and the timing for them, which I think that this board has done a really good job. When PFAS hit and we knew we were going to have to do something, we were ahead of the curve on that. They hadn't even really settled on where they were going to be for how much percentage of parts per trillion were going to be allowed. We wanted to get to 0. We were like, we could probably get it to, less than the 22 parts, but then they're going to change it again. We've already designed it for a higher amount. Let's try to get to 0. There was a lot of thought in that. It cost us about $12 million for the facilities that we built. Not even a year later, other communities that were building that same, volume as what we had were up in the $70 and $80 million. Knowing the time to take the opportunity, seize on it, another tough vote to spend that kind of money to do that. But we had the foresight to predict that. Even when I started, going to the ribbon cuttings and things like that, it's all fun because I never had to make those tough votes. Those were done on the committees before us. There's like a 10-year window. I think that in 10, 15 years, people are going to look back and be astonished with all that we have completed. And they're going to say even more, wow, thank God they did it that year, because this would have been, $1 billion that they would have had to spend. And I'm not exaggerating when I say these numbers, because we see how quickly they're escalating. So,
Dottie, can I just say, in our first term, it was a lot more fun because we just rode your coattails and went to ribbon cuttings. Second term, we had to do a lot more work. So.
But I think
More
that
gray hair,
also
prove it.
the leadership of working with our department heads, with you, Connor, and this board working together, I want to just give a lot of credit to the board for the way that we work together, the way that we all do our due diligence to bring these ideas and conclusions to the table. Jen, when you said that Connor is very receptive of our ideas, we hear things from the community, we bring them forward. And even at times when we don't think we have the capacity, every time I would go to a Mass Municipal conference, I would come back with all these great ideas, and Connor would be like, oh God, here she comes again. But one of the things was the age-friendly. We really cared about getting that in, and I remember, how are we going to do this? We don't have the capacity to do it. We'll figure it out, and the next thing you know, we were able to do that. The same with the budget book. Let's try to strive for this. There's no capacity to get that done. Everybody worked extra hard to get that done, and then we're winning awards for it. So I think that seizing the opportunity when it's available is really important. And I think your leadership in guiding everyone to get those things done is really important, and exceeds expectations across the board on this one.
Thank you.
So the next one is infrastructure, facilities, and public works. Did you want to give a little summary on
Yeah,
this
this
one?
one's much shorter. All of our objectives are complete or in progress. Bids and contracts were awarded for police, fire, public works, $9 million under our construction estimate. Bids for the Red Mill Road PFAS treatment plant upgrades were also awarded under budget. The long-awaited Mass DOT signalization improvements at Washington and Elm are going to start this year, pending DOT. This spring, we closed out the final change order for the Blanche James Elementary School. In the end, it was on time and $13 million under the voter-approved budget, which, with a debt exclusion, that doesn't translate to a tax increase that the town keeps and reallocates. That just translates to a proportionally smaller tax increase. So what voters had approved as a $435 annual cost is actually $285 per year. The year since, public construction costs have exploded so dramatically that communities are now considering high schools that cost above $500 million. There may be some that pass $1 billion in the next few years. And it's becoming commonplace for single school building projects, even with MSBA financial support, to require tax increases greater than $1,000 a year for communities, with some pushing above $2,000 per year, whether that's small communities or larger ones. Coupled with the 3 votes that residents took to advance the police, fire, public works facilities in 2021, and then 2 of those votes in 2023, Easton's on track to replace 8 buildings, which will be 84% of all of our municipal facilities, a third of all total public facilities, including the schools, between those 2 debt exclusions, for a net tax impact of approximately $913 per year. Substantial an impact as this is, and it is less than what many cities and towns are now considering for single building projects due to the cost of construction. The foresight and the generosity of our residents who have approved these, after years of deliberation, will save tens of millions and position Easton for functional, safe, and appropriate public places for its children, residents, educators, first responders for generations. So, and I agree with your note, Dottie. It wasn't in here. It was a couple years ago now. But this board and voters at town meeting being willing to move quickly on things like PFAS, where we got to work on designing and I think even potentially bidding that before the state had finalized their regulations. And there are communities around here looking at 40 million. There are some communities that are looking in 9 digits. You know, as much as we may not want those things to happen, we may not agree with a regulation, or we may not think that it's fair or being administered justly because there's no state funding coming with it, they don't go away. They just cost more and more. And so I appreciate this board and the community who voted to fund those things when we did.
And we were also one of the first communities to join the class action lawsuit against the manufacturers of PFAS
correct.
that were including that. So that we are usually right on top of things like that. I also do want to call out that you were honored to receive the Massachusetts Public Official of the Year award from the New England chapter of the American Public Works Association, and you were the only municipal official to be requested to be on the PFAS task force because of the experience that you've had in Easton. And I will also say that David Field has received awards. There's many awards in our staff, and they're well deserved, and it's because of the exceptional work. Jamie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, as a member of the Municipal Building Committee, I've had the great fortune of watching another project and a wonderful team of which Dave is also a member of, very talented team, break ground while coming in well under construction estimates to the tune of over $9 million. So Connor, this, I'm going to give you, attributes to the right leadership, develops high-performing team that delivers an exceptional product well under budget. So,
Thank you.
Jen?
I'm going to read mine because I think it's important in light of some of the discussions I've been having around the Public Safety Works building. One prong in the town's strategy for increasing thoughtful growth has been investment in infrastructure. Not only does good infrastructure attract new investment in the community, it also makes sense for long-term fiscal planning. Based on data-driven life cycle cost analysis, when buildings and system components are pushed beyond their life cycle, the costs associated with operations start to follow a steep northward curve. While it can be painful to make these capital investments for us as taxpayers, Connor does a really good job recognizing that, Connor and others in this town that work with him and Force and also gives the community done a fantastic job recognizing when we are at a point where we need to make these investments because we're throwing good money and very precious money in an increasingly bad problem. I appreciate your strategic approach to this, Connor, and the deep thoughtfulness, and the approaches to streamlining where we can, which will also save us money in significant ways down the road. So, you've also done a lot to address the gap with sewer, which, we're playing catch up there for various reasons. We were behind in that as a community, and that is no one's fault, but it's a decision that was made, and we're working to address that. So you've done a fantastic job of doing what you can to close that gap, which, as Mark pointed out earlier, is critical for economic development. And I think that there's a lot of thought and community effort around this and communication when we're talking through projects, as evidenced in the 10-year process and all that goes into making sure that folks are informed, have an opportunities to participate and follow along in the process from start to finish.
Thanks, Jen.
Infrastructure, facilities, and public works. I feel as though I covered that off in my last, when I spoke last. I don't really have much more to add. You know how I feel. I don't know how we do what we do with what we have, which I'm prepared to say to Dave in a moment after his presentation. So thank you.
Greg?
Yeah, I just want to call out you, Connor, and Dave for the issue of PFAS, because none of us had a complete understanding until you guys started talking about it long before the state had any. I remember those hearings we had here when the state had no idea what PFAS was or where it came from or how we were going to handle it. And you guys were out front in getting that done. And not to mention the cost, the fact that the cost was not as great as what people are now experiencing. It was just the idea that people in the community were concerned about their drinking water. And you guys knew that, and you stepped up and did it. And I was just blown away by how well you guys did that. So I thank you both for doing that.
And the only thing that I just want to add to this is that, you and the board have followed the direction of voters to pursue these types of improvements. They're all things that were discussed in public. We helped people understand, give them the data that we worked so hard to develop to help people make decisions to move these forward. And I want to thank the voters for constantly seeing that and recognizing the value of our public works and infrastructure. So everyone said you exceeded expectations on those as well. The next one is climate and energy policy.
I have very minimal commentary here. I said meets. We took important steps forward here, but we temporarily paused certain grant-funded planning programs so that all hands can be on deck directed to the budget. ECAT has been formed. They've been meeting. Jen has been working with Sean, and they've been doing a ton of work there, as have the members of the committee. They've had some stakeholder meetings. MVPP 2.0 has been working on resiliency, but again, we've paused some of these for the next couple months while we figure out what we're working with come June. So I think we took important steps to get started, but we have more work to do.
Does anyone have anything they want to add?
Just to reinforce that, great groundwork's been laid for future needs, and focus will continue as you gain more bandwidth, right? So planning and for the future and quality of life.
Yeah, and as the chair of ECAT, I do want to acknowledge that the town, under your leadership, has done a tremendous amount of work in the past. And, unfortunately, we just hit a bit of a bump with having to pause things. I think it's an opportunity for the group to come out and see the outcome of this and make sure that they're understanding of where we are in our financial picture, so that we can optimize the work of this committee to really make an impact. So I'm looking at the silver lining of it all. And thank you for enabling this to proceed. I think it'll be impactful over the coming year.
Thanks, Jen. You actually just reminded me in saying that, and I think this actually did happen this year. The Department of Energy Resources recognized Easton as one of the few communities in the 20% club, which is we were one of the first green communities in Massachusetts to join that state program, which is a energy consumption and reduction program where you work on improving your HVAC, your enveloping, and other practices to reduce your carbon footprint and your energy consumption, which also saves you money. And you set a baseline of your total energies. I think it's in your BTUs in your town and school buildings. And Easton has set that bench line, set a multi-year target, and we have hit and successfully reduced our consumption of energy by 20% across our public buildings. And so that is a good thing.
And we got an award for that. You and Greg went out to Devon's to get that in front of the state. So
that was good. So thank you for citing the past efforts. Again, credit to Public Works and planners and citizens on those committees. But yeah, we've made some good progress there. Thanks, Jen.
Simple, straightforward, no massive leaps in this past year, but no regressions either. And I appreciate you putting your time elsewhere where it belongs. So meets expectations.
Yeah, I agree. Meets expectations.
I also agree. One thing I just want to call out on this for people is it is so great that we get so many grants. This year we got a lot of grants at the same time period, and they have to be spent in a certain time period, and it requires all hands on deck for a lot of them. For each one of these committees that we have a select board representative. So some of us are on several committees, some of us are on fewer committees, but more time. I would say being on the PACE committee is like being on 5 committees. But also it requires staff time from Sean, and this contributes to the amount of hours that they work. This is usually on top of the time Elizabeth, doing note-taking or other people that are involved in it. A lot of them require department heads to come in and speak at it, and this is over and above the duties that they have. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness of pausing this because we just can't burn everybody out at these things. So that doesn't mean that we're not going to get back to it and it's not important, but prioritizing and knowing where we can do it, having such a good reputation with the state that they agreed to allow us a little bit of flexibility in that because they know that we're doing a good job. These goodwill gestures that other agencies know about Easton gives us also a lot of credibility when we have to, make a tweak to something like that. So the next one is planning and economic development.
Sure, Dottie. I'm usually quite critical of myself in this area, but I do feel comfortable saying that we collectively exceeded expectations this year, mostly because Easton has identified, again, not through me, this is through going back generations, as a top economic development priority for over 20 years, whether that's through strategic plans or through comprehensive wastewater plans adopted by town meeting, achieving an intermunicipal agreement between Easton and the city of Brockton to allow the industrial park to connect into the city's regional wastewater treatment facility. Really happy that we were able to finally thread that needle and get that done this year. So we're really appreciative of the city and everyone in public works and legal and the mayor's administration that worked with us and the select board supporting it. So that's exciting. That's going to put a groundwork there that we can really capitalize on for the next 5 and 10, 15 years. That'll unlock economic potential for not just Easton, but for region. Other objectives have been met or advanced. Swifts Park is advancing to construction. It's won state grants from state recreation associations or agencies. Late Representative Carol Doherty, who did so much for Easton, we found out after her passing that she had successfully acquired $75,000 in state funding to support that project as well, which is wonderful. Master plan update is grant funded. It's commenced. It's also paused while we finalize our budget process. In planning, and members of the planning board are regularly meeting with developers to understand their needs and work with them. We've received a grant to review and improve our permitting processes to make sure that we're doing what we can administratively to get people, individuals and businesses through permitting into construction as efficiently as we can. And one of the things we wanted to do this year to help get people through permitting as fast as possible was to bring an engineer on board for complex mandatory reviews, things like stormwater that can really get bogged down in peer review. And we did not proceed with that given the financial constraints the town is under. I hope that we have a brighter day at some point in the future where we can make that investment, because I think that will pay real dividends, not so much for town hall, but for our residents and businesses to have. I think there's nothing wrong with peer review necessarily, but when it's an employee of the community whose job it is to help you, I think that's a different level of availability and support to get you through permitting. So that had to be shelved, but otherwise we're making progress.
Excellent. Comments on this one?
Yeah, just say the thoughtful planning of sewer districts has us reaping benefits on a daily basis, opening huge growth opportunities which will benefit every resident and business that chooses to operate in Easton. We're a desirable place to live and becoming a more desirable place to start a business every day. The Easton Industrial Park Sewer Project, years of persistent communication and determination, put us in a good position to partner with the city of Brockton. So continue the good work.
I put meats and I actually regret it because I think you've exceeded here. And I don't know if I can change that, Dottie, or not. But for the record, I think I came in with your very critical eye this year in this one.
That's fine.
And as I'm reading through it and thinking through it more, I think the reason is that a lot of the things you have done this year are things that, by definition, planning is setting the stage for things to happen. And a lot of things happen that we're going to actually see unfolding from your work this year. So I'm very excited about that. And I think the sewer, the industrial park is huge. And, I think that we have a fantastic planning department. And, this crew works together in great ways to make great things happen. So thank you.
Yeah, the very definition of it exceeds expectations. Brockton, tying into Brockton Sewer. I wasn't expecting that. You exceeded that.
Fair enough.
But then all the other smaller things, you continue to. I don't know what. Well, I can think of some things left to do for future years, but I think you've done exceptionally well this year.
Yeah, I find that you have exceeded expectations here, and I think the industrial park sewer connection with Brockton will be huge for us in the future. And I think that the number of businesses that have been brought in as a result of having sewer in the 3 other districts is significant. And I applaud you for exceeding expectations.
economic development is a real challenge in a town like Easton for the available space. And, we want certain things to happen in certain places, but when we don't own the property, we can't really dictate what owners do with their property. So there's certain areas that we know should be developed, and the property owners are not making that initiative to do it and not welcoming our encouragement sometimes. So that's a real challenge for us. But laying the process, starting with zoning changes, permitting efficiencies, and strategic plans for the areas that we want to incentivize business growth. We have a district improvement financing, the DIF, down in Five Corners that's already showing great success. And, if we look at the areas that we targeted for economic growth, our downtown, the Five Corners area, and Queenshead, we have brought in a lot of new businesses. And I list them out. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I'll say two of the most recent big ones are the Volkswagen dealership, Silco Volkswagen, that just opened a few weeks ago, and that was controversial. Not everybody, thought that would, whatever we pick, there's certain, everybody has an opinion, and not everybody's 100% focused on that. I think that turned out better than my expectations. It looks like it's been there forever. It took that real blighted area and made it vibrant, and those are people that work there that are gonna probably shop, for lunch in that area, and spend their money in Easton on their way home if they don't live here. The other LTP pickleball, it isn't in one of our targeted areas for economic development, but that is a big boon for Easton. Very successful. And, some of them I look and I'm like, was it this year or last year? I listed a few of them, like, Gianna's Restaurant, All Town Fresh. Never dreamed that a supermarket would be in a gas station and be so popular, and a real contributor to our community. So, I just put a bunch of them in there, but I think that you did a really great job on that. So these are all exceeds as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dahlia. And I want to also say, because folks, when businesses are going through permitting, obviously you have to, in many cases, notify abutters, and people have their rights to go and weigh in on that. It can be tough to get through permitting, not just Easton, but in Massachusetts in general. And so I really appreciate the business community in Easton. I think we have a good relationship with Easton Chamber of Commerce, with the Metro South Chamber of Commerce. And there are a lot of folks investing in expanding small businesses or starting new ones. To your point, Dottie, I think sometimes people think towns can say, well, we want exactly this business on this piece of land, but people have their property rights, and it's incredibly expensive right now. So I give a tremendous amount of credit, whether that's VW or LTP or any of the businesses here, any business who's trying to find a way to invest and expand in this town, we appreciate. I know I appreciate, and they're contributing to Easton, so I say thank you to them.
And I just want to give a shout out to Mark and Craig for being on the Economic Development Council and the work that you do to encourage business in our community as well.
Thank you.
The next one is public health, safety, and community wellness.
That meets expectation here. I think Easton performs well in this area, and I certainly shouldn't take credit for it. Much of that is owed to members of our team, people on the care team, health and community services, Sean working with them, members of a lot of our boards and committees. These people have worked on things like expanding tax and financial relief programming. They've worked on a lot of great programs of opioid awareness, working with our mental health clinician, providing financial resources to folks. So I think that we do a good job here given our resources. I would always like to see more, but I know our team is really working across departments, and they really care about people, and we're looking out for people, and so that I appreciate that. I think we have good relationships with the schools, with regional schools, with Stonehill, to try to find areas for collaboration for shared services as well.
I just disagree with you. I said that you exceed expectations and not meet, so I appreciate the humble approach too, but that's what I like about you as a leader too, is that you put your people first and you meet their needs. And that's, again, a hallmark of an outstanding leader. So with budget, and here's I have a little typo in here, but constraints, this group continues to exceed expectations and is well poised for improved services with better funding.
Jen?
So I actually thought of this as an example of you've pushed the baseline so far for this one over the past several years that it's actually hard to like keep up. But we have an amazing baseline in this space because of the work you and folks in the various departments that touch upon this work in. And I think, looking ahead, this isn't all any kind of feedback about your performance over this past year, but I think as we're looking ahead over the coming year, I think this is one of those spaces where we're going to have to be really, really creative. And there's a lot of things we're going to have to explore, which this group has done such a good job doing under your leadership for the past several years. So I think we're going to be doing more of that creative thinking when it comes to how we tackle these things.
Thanks.
Great work, though, Connor. Thank you.
Mark?
I agree with everything you said about yourself. But to Jen's point, I know you're constantly seeking the exceeds expectations, but you're really hard on yourself. Years will come where, an opportunity doesn't present itself to do anything or to do that much more or to really make that much change in something very specific. And when that year comes, the job is to just maintain. And that is what is expected. And I think in some categories, most categories you exceed expectations, but in some categories you meet expectations. And I could say exceeds expectations, but it's just, you maintain it exceptionally well.
Greg?
I concur with Jamie that you exceed expectations in this area. And what I said was that you and your team have done a remarkable job in this area. The addition of a mental health clinician working with police and fire, the expansion of tax and financial relief programming, including the Taxation Aid Committee and the SERV Committee, the SERV program, and the use of ARPA money, which other towns did not do, has responded to the needs of many in our community. You're always thinking ahead and anticipating solutions to problems, and I very much appreciate what you do.
I think the recalibration of that department to bring on, a mental health specialist, to combine paramedicine with that, to go out and be proactive in our community to people that are vulnerable or in really bad places for mental health or substance use, to proactively reach out to them and help them before that next emergency call happens, to follow up with them, just to show that you care. Those are not necessarily things that I ever would have dreamed that, our board would be involved with, or that our town. It's not like the nuts and bolts of the things that we do. I really feel that was such a creative effort, and it really shows how much we do care about people. And it breaks my heart thinking that is going to be broken up next year if we don't have an override, because we're going to have to take some of the people out of that grouping, and it is going to hurt. It's going to hurt the people that we support. We're one of the very few communities that have something like that, and I'm very proud of it, and it shows, I think, the values of this board and the values of our administration to make that happen. So that's what I'll say about that one. The next one is quality of life, community engagement, and inclusivity.
I listed meets. I have played a supporting role here, but again, I think this is an area of credit's due to others, whether that's staff or citizen volunteers who've made amazing contributions to our community this year, whether that's for Tricentennial, which, as was noted earlier, is funded by generous donations of our residents and businesses, which is amazing, and a tremendous amount of hours from the folks on that committee and its supporters, the continuing excellence of our cultural district. I think it's easy to be proud of living in Easton because everywhere you look, you can find something pretty amazing and uplifting that service groups are doing, volunteers are doing. We have an enormous amount of nonprofits in the area. We have a huge amount of service-oriented groups, things like the Lions, just doing so much good work, often without recognition or praise. And so getting to just have, I think, a supporting role in the background with some of those things is an honor. I think a really great, super recent example is Health and Community Services, where community programming, led by Deputy Pitty, working with Easton Recreation Commission, were recognized by the Mass Recreation and Parks Association for the Regional Community Impact of the Year Award for South Shore for their work to expand inclusion through the development of shared mission group that's brought together town and community groups of overlapping missions and priority of serving residents with disabilities. I think that's incredible work, right? That's not something that's in a job description. That's not something that's required of that department or of a rec commission, and I think that comes from a place because they really care. And those other groups that want to spend their time working with them really care, so I think that's awesome. Certain other objectives, like the recreation master plan, have not advanced. That we did bid that, but that didn't work out at that bid stage in the first contractor, so we'll need to put more focus on that in coming years. Others, like HEROES and related tax relief, will be on the town meeting warrant this year and for you to discuss later tonight.
Awesome. Jamie?
I got lost in my notes, sorry. That was on, that was
Six.
six, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ray. So the countless citizens who engage in volunteerism within our community do so because of the great reception from town offices and dedicated staff. Without leadership that prioritizes inclusivity and community engagement, this high level of community engagement does not exist. So I'm gonna, again, this has exceeded expectations from me.
Thanks, Jamie.
I was also exceeds. And I agree with everything you wrote, and I appreciate your shout out to all of the folks who have contributed to this space. I focused on your work, and the thing I wanted to call out was that you are just very committed to community engagement. You're very accessible. You take time to talk to anyone with questions. I talk to people in the community who tell me they've talked to you over an issue. I think that's amazing. Like, that's how it should be, and you do that. You make the time for it. And I really, really appreciate that. You're present at events. You take the time to develop and share very consumable information with folks. So it's very easy to digest. It's understandable, clear, and helps bring the point across and understandable. So I'm also very proud to live in a community that prioritizes inclusivity. I'm glad Jamie called it out, and I want to reinforce that. I think it's a very important thing that makes Easton a very wonderful place to live. And in general, you know, the quality of life here is why people choose to continue to make this their home. So thank you. There's a lot of balance that goes into this, making a place wonderful to live, but you know, you've done a great job at enabling that, so good work.
I put exceeds expectations. Simply just look around the community. People are knocking down the door to get in. It's really tough to live in this community. And very few people leave this community. And I believe that our community it's a reflection of the people that live in it, but us supporting them through you. So if you think this is an amazing place to live, and it has exceeded your expectations, then I believe some credit's due to you and your department heads and how you conduct yourself, how you engage with the public. I've never heard a bad word about you, Connor, to be honest. And if they were,
Jinxed it now.
you know, if it were to happen, I would really, you know, question it. But even people, this might sound weird, but even people who don't like you, right? Because you're honest with people. If somebody is coming at you, you'll be, come to my office, or hey, you know, they'll come at you with an email. You pick up the phone. You know, hey, are you available right now to talk? And you'll pick up the phone and you'll call them right then and there. You go above and beyond in every regard. So you exceed my expectations. Thanks, Mark.
I'm the outlier. I think you meet my expectations, Connor. But what I said was that Connor's been very supportive of efforts on behalf of his managers to engage our community in activities, enhancing the quality of life in Easton. One of the beauties of our community is the number of citizens who volunteer their time and efforts on behalf of others.
Yep.
And you have played a significant role in fostering an inclusive and supportive community.
Thanks, Craig.
And I would just say, like I mentioned before, you know, we live in this amazing town. We don't really have, you know, once you're here all the time, you don't have anything to compare it with anymore, right? So, you know, if there's something like when I go for a walk and I walk by Oaks Ames Hall and, you know, the library and these amazing Richardson buildings, like we have that stuff like right in walking distance or like, you know, biking distance or whatever, the amazing open space and walking trails and all that stuff that we have. There's really literally something for everyone here. And I think that keeping that going, keeping that supported, keeping the volunteer groups connected is really important. So I also think that you exceed the expectations for quality of life. The next one is human resources management, labor relations, and organizational sustainability.
Sure, I put meets here. Objectives are either complete or in progress. We've achieved one-year extensions to collective bargaining agreements with 6 out of 7 municipal unions. I believe we maintain a positive labor management relationship, which in my opinion is critical to having high-performing teams, high-functioning workplace, and highly functioning departments. As we are cutting budgets for 26, you know, and again, I'm in trouble for the same phrase. It's been noted repeatedly, our departments and our people do more with less. We'll be heading into next year with fewer staff than we've had since pre-pandemic, and they're busier than ever. So the reductions in that non-override budget are into the bone, and the level of service that is provided, like we are at a wall. And great labor management relationships are important. Having great department heads is important, but these are human beings. And I think the board feels this way. I think folks, when they look at it, can understand it. We are not an organization that, before I was town administrator, I've worked in entry-level jobs. I worked in every level of position in this building. And I know it still happens. I'm not going to tell anyone watching, like, oh, we have perfect customer service all the time. That's not possible. But like blind phone transfers will send me up a wall, right? 'Cause it's like, we need to at least ask somebody like, hey, what do you need for help? And let's find the right person for you, right? A lot of people here fall into that category, and we want to help, we want to do good. But heading into next year, we are going to need to scale our services back. We've talked a lot about that in the budgets, but you know, that ties into organizational sustainability, is that we can't continue to expect that we're going to cut and also improve. So,
Jamie?
I like that line, blind phone transfers, because I hate when that happens.
it's like gets lobbed on you. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh, I love it. Exceeds expectations. And the quick snapshot is managing a lean budget into COVID, managing out of COVID, soaring expenses. You cannot put much more on a team and at the same time have them stay on board and navigate through so many unknowns hitting the public sector. We are continuing down a path of uncertainty that will absolutely demand calm, cool, collect, and strategic leadership.
Thanks, Jamie.
I had exceeds, and I didn't have to say much here because I think the reality is you get the job done, which is really important, and there's a lot involved in that. But the thing that you go above and beyond on is fostering a culture of openness, collaboration, and support. And I think that goes really far in talent retention. People want to work here, they want to be here. And as that ties back to the fiscal piece as well, because we want strong talent here, because we're relying on them more than ever. So,
Right.
you know, it all comes full circle.
Thanks, Jen.
So thank you.
I'll just read what I have here. It's the first time I've done this all night, so I'll give myself a pass. Navigating HR, labor relations, and organizational sustainability is difficult under perfect conditions. Connor has excelled in all of these categories despite the at times difficult environment. He has accomplished every objective we have set out for him within his control. He is transparent and informative to the select board, explaining challenges while also consistently coming with solutions for us to discuss. I'll just add a little bit on the end there. There are challenges and difficulties that we face, that you face every single day. And when it gets eventually to us, if it even gets to us, you never come with a problem. You come with a problem and about 10 solutions that we can mull over, think about, talk amongst ourselves, and then tell you what it is that we'd like to see. And you are successful, like 100% of the time.
I don't know about that, but
Thanks, Mark.
well, and I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I appreciate the vote of confidence.
Yeah, I also think you exceed in this area, and that they've done a masterful job in working with our managers and our unions on behalf of our citizens. And I think that's incredibly important. And I echo what was said before about the fact that you encourage your staff and that people want to work with you, and that you share the responsibility and the kudos for what goes on in this town. So,
Thanks.
And I also said exceeds. I agree with everything everybody else has said, and one thing that I just want to add is that, even behind the door discussions or out in public discussions, you really care about the people that work in this town. And it shows in your thoughtfulness about the way that we look at having some organizational sustainability, giving people an opportunity for growth, respecting people and their different perspectives and their different capabilities and abilities, and really forging those strong relationships of trust across the board. So that has to take place to be able to be successful the way that we work. So I appreciate that. The next one is town government. We're getting towards the end, so
Yeah, we'll be
if
quick.
people are watching, we're going to move along.
Exceeds, I think, as far as efficiency. Samarac, we're looking at expanding with other regional PSAPs to achieve even greater efficiency. Our local government, I suppose we can talk about different metrics there, but I think in many is one of the most efficient in the state. So.
Yep. Jamie?
Just a good time for everyone to reflect on this. Read this. Just read through the bullet points.
Yeah.
Now's a great time to get familiar with all the work that's been being done for and under your tutelage now 9 years. It's very transparent.
I wrote exceeds, and there's one sentence, so I'll read it because it sums it up really well. We run with an extremely lean town government, but you would not know it day to day because day-to-day interaction with any given department, things are running very well. So it's, this kind of goes back to the old idea of like in constrained environments, you see things given, but you guys keep it together under such extremely strained circumstances. And, I think that it's almost it's created a challenge for us. The public don't see how hard that can be. But so I want to say great work, but also like it's really tough.
Exceeds expectations. I wrote exceptionally lean. I didn't realize how much I hated that either until you pointed out that phrase. Like I don't ever want to use that again. But anyway, you've done so well to a detriment where that's the expectation. So when the challenge becomes imminent and serious and real, and there's what we're going through now, then people they have enjoyed this expectation that has always been fulfilled. So now that we're facing difficulty, it's almost too. I don't want to paint it as a pejorative, but to the detriment of the success. Like, wait a minute, something's going wrong right now, or not that it's wrong. Like, you understand what I'm saying?
Okay. But we're not, as I put in the budget, we're not innovating our way out of it this time.
Yeah. So exceeds.
Exceeds. Under your leadership, our town government does a remarkable job for the helping our citizens, doing more with less, and being an example of efficiency for other towns to follow.
That's correct.
And I also said exceeds. We get a lot of curveballs thrown at us of things that just come up or, challenges, opportunities, and you really handle those exceptionally, so, and everything else that everyone else said. The next one is service and support to the select board.
I put meets. I believe I provide high quality, reliable, and professional service to you and the board. I think we maintain a highly productive working relationship. I give equal credit back to you. Your focus is and has been on the needs of Easton and on the public. That allows us to maximize our productivity given limited resources. Again, I'm not going to point at other communities and use examples, but there are times when boards are maybe not focused so much on long-term plans or finances or other things, and there are other challenges or other things that they're spending their energy on or directing the energy of the administration on, and you lose time and effort. You can't do big projects. You can't focus on the big picture. You can't keep your eye on the ball when you're doing that. So you all, you have different perspectives and different experience professionally and lived, and but you all care about Easton and wanting everyone here to do a good job, and that is really important to me, and I know the department heads and the staff.
The long hours have never stopped you from keeping your door open and spending even longer hours explaining positions, maybe even having to break out some elementary math for me. So I think you exceed expectations here, and you explain your position well, and you've absolutely shined under the continued sharing of budget knowledge with every and anyone who listens to the countless hours of public discourse. You bring civil back to discourse. You make a great example and a courageous leader.
Thanks, Jamie.
I also had exceeds. I feel very supported, well prepared to serve in my capacity, which is very important. And I say, Connor, and I also give a shout out to Elizabeth and Sean here, which is very, very important. The team, you do an excellent job providing us with information, answering questions, and more. So you really all go above and beyond, and it's very appreciated.
Thanks, Jen.
I agree with your self-assessment, meets expectations.
I think you exceed expectations, that your relationship with us, because you're so inclusive, thoughtful, supportive, and work with us very effectively on some very difficult issues and tasks. So I think you exceed my expectations.
Correct.
And I would just say that you encourage the board to consider different perspectives, and the board challenges you in return. This creates a healthy, respectful relationship that I value, and thanks to your support, I feel well prepared and confident in the decisions that I make and vote on.
Thank you.
So 10, inter and intra-governmental relationships.
I put meets. I continue to serve. I'm the vice chair of SEMREC, which provides 911 services to the SEMREC Board of Directors, which is the governing body for the 911 services of Easton, Foxborough, Norton, and Mansfield. I maintain positive relationships with state and federal representatives of Easton. I'm a regular voice on Beacon Hill, advocating for Easton's financial and programmatic needs, whether that's on PFAS funding, Chapter 70 education funding, working with our partners in the schools, or infrastructure. In this performance period, I was invited to lobby on Beacon Hill on behalf of a proposed and sadly not adopted legislation to regulate PFAS in Massachusetts that the PFAS Interagency Task Force developed. A committee, as you noted, I was appointed to by the legislature as the sole representative of municipal government. So I think I'm doing my job there.
Yeah, and I'll say exceeds. And there's been a lot of changeover, as we know, at this state representation between the House and the Senate. We've got new folks, and when time permits, I know this team will jump in and build those relationships back up, and it'll take some time.
Thanks, Jamie.
I had exceeds. It's imperative that our town leadership maintains relationships and follows development at the regional, state, and federal levels. And I believe you do a fantastic job with that. You are a solid advocate out where we need advocacy. I'm really impressed with your work with SEMREC and that it continues, and it's really been invaluable for our community. And I think you've brought us a solid reputation as a community out in the world, so thank you.
Thanks.
I put meets. I agree with your self-assessment.
I put down meets, that you maintain a very positive relationship with our state and federal partners. And just as an aside, Carol Doherty, God rest her soul, raved about you and about the way you went about doing your job and the relationship you had, and the expectation that people had when you came to testify, that you knew what the heck you were talking about. So I just wanted you to know that.
Yeah, it was wonderful to get to work with Carol.
I just want to make a comment. So this is 10 out of the 11 questions. And you can tell they get smaller and smaller answers as you get along because it takes a while. So I had, many of the same things that you have in there. What I didn't put in there that I've been thinking about as we've been talking is that, a lot of communities, especially when you're going through a tough time like we are right now, people end up getting pitted against each other, and especially the town and the school side. And so I want to call out that specifically, that I feel like you have done a really good job balancing that and working in collaboration with the schools. And I think this board has also done a really good job with that. There's not friction. We're all on the same team. There's this pot of money. We all care about education. We care about the town services. And I think that is something that I heard from other communities, because I see communities ripping themselves apart with their boards, and other communities recognize that Easton has that strong leadership. So I definitely, I know that we all respect the superintendent and the school committee. I appreciate your comments earlier on that, Craig. And I think that you definitely lead that as well in the way that you work together.
Thanks, Dottie.
For personal and professional growth, this is our last category.
Meets. I continue to advance my professional standards. I'm a member to various statewide committees, including being reappointed to the Massachusetts Municipal Association's Fiscal Policy Committee for another 2-year term. I make, where possible, time for new educational opportunities, but the pace and volume of work is making that grow increasingly and bordering on impossible, frankly, if I'm being honest.
So I think this'll, don't discount the personal growth that comes with the work that you oversee day to day, because it's like the on-the-job training that happens when you get out of school. School's great, certificates are great, PhD's great, but it's out here that you're getting it done every day. And when you have time to reflect, you'll realize the personal growth that we see and that you continue to exemplify.
Thanks, Jamie.
So I put meets only because I do want you to challenge you to find more space for yourself to do things. This is a doing more with less moment here, but you are really good at finding ways to align your professional development with things that we need as a community. And that's great, but I think there's other things that, and the reality is you don't have the time for it. I mean, you just don't. So I put meets in here, not because you're not doing a fantastic job, but because I want to encourage you to, if you can find 5 minutes somewhere for yourself over the next year. I don't know, we have this conversation every year, and it's really, really tough. And it's one of those things that, like, as a people manager in my own job, you see that when people have the time to learn new things and dig in ways that the day-to-day is really important, but also kind of that other perspectives you get. It's critical.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we don't have all the ideas here, right? Much like we are happy when folks come to PACE and come to open houses and share their ideas. I mean, we're certainly not reinventing the wheel here every day. I mean, it's great to steal good ideas from other people who have run into similar problems, right? That's a lot more efficient.
And things are changing so fast, in all levels of government right now.
Yes.
There's so much change happening, and also in terms of technology and how that might be impacting what we're doing.
Right.
So I think that is why next year will be really important to just take that deep breath and say, I have to build it in. Like, my company actually sent an email to us saying you have to start building this into your work because there's so many new things to learn. And if you're not doing this, we're all going to be irrelevant. I don't think that's the case for you, but I just want to challenge you.
I put exceeds the last 2.5 hours. That's why. It's a summary of the past year, of the past couple of years, of the past decade, and you've been doing this in that position for 9 years, so you have absolutely exceeded professional growth. I think even among your peers tell you that all the time. So, to Jen's point, we're very supportive of you and your own personal growth and mental health. So we are supportive of you putting yourself first, because without that, then you can't be here, and we need you here.
Mark.
I put down meets, and I wrote down, it's been my pleasure to work closely with Connor for the past, I said 8 years, but it's actually 9 years.
Well, we're in the ninth
I just
year,
started
so
counting.
you're thinking of
I just started
what's already
counting.
done.
He has grown personally and professionally and is a role model for other town administrators. Wait for it.
Oh, there it is.
I had the privilege of being one of 3 votes to hire Connor in 2017, and I have never, ever regretted that vote. I knew you would all be disappointed if I didn't say that.
I love that you left it for the end. It was perfect.
Thank you, Craig.
You're welcome, Connor.
Well, I will say, when you first came on board, there were people that were doubtful and were wondering if you would be able to rise to the occasion. I've gone back to them all and made them say that I was right. So in Craig's spirit of communication. Seriously, you get results, plain and simple. Over the years, you've grown in the many areas that this complex job requires, including strategy, vision, and problem solving. My main concern is the long hours you work. With only 3 staff members in the administrative office compared to 6 or more in similar towns, the workload's unsustainable. So again, what Jen said, I really want you to keep working on that. I know it's really hard when there's so much to do, but I want to recognize that we see that as something that we care about. If it's just a matter of the sustainability. So we want you to continue to love the job and not burn out. And also, that would mean we'd have to find somebody else, and that would be just really hard to do now. So I think you overall got an exceptional review, and I think everybody agrees here. Again, this is going to be online. I'd encourage people to look at it, not only to see what our comments are, but to see what really goes into the job, what are the objectives that were set forth. We hold the bar very high, and I think that, when we look back at it, it was worth taking the extra time.
Sorry, Dave.
Maybe not everybody in the audience is happy, but
Sorry, guys.
I really do. I think it's really an important time to remember and reflect on the hard work that goes on with you and with the staff, Connor.
Thank you.
So,
How did Wendy, Dave, and Greg draw the short straw?
You guys were troopers.
Sorry.
so the next,
Can I have one thing?
sure.
I just want to say that it's increasingly more difficult to find talent in municipal government and folks who want to go into this as a career. It's brutal, and I just really believe we're extremely lucky to have not just Connor, who has brought incredible talent, but you've found the best of the best across the town when it comes to folks to lead things and to do their job. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very proud of the team we have here, and it's been a real privilege to be doing this long enough. I think the shelf life of town administrators is often 3 to 5 years. To get to support existing great folks we had like Dave when I came into this role, and then also lead the process that brought some of our newer department heads on board who were just exceptional people. So thank you for that. Dave, I promise this one, unless the board wants to surprise me here, is very short, which is the item 13, which is generally, if the board has a favorable view of my performance, I ask for a 1-year extension on my term. This is just a clean extension. There's no adjustment to terms. There's no increase in salary. It's just 1 more year. So if the board is willing, I would appreciate it.
What do you think? You want to keep them 1 more year?
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah, I move that we extend the town administrator's employment agreement by 1 year to June 30th of 2029.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right. Dave, I'm done. You and Greg can do that.
I wouldn't mind leading all of us in a stretch, to be honest with you, Greg.
We'll be no longer than an hour.
This is one of my favorite presentations, the pavement management. I love this one.
Enough about the budget, enough about lauding Connor. The real reason everybody's here tonight is pavement management.
Yes.
Good evening, Dave Field, Director of Public Works.
Greg Swan, Deputy Director of Public Works.
And Greg's going to drive the ship tonight. He's kind of taken over the reins of the new pavement management system, so he's going to be kind of leading the presentation.
You've got 5 minutes.
I'm just trying to share the screen here.
Do you need help?
Sean, you might have to come over and do this.
I need to stretch my legs anyways.
Yeah.
I'm just, tired.
Long day.
Real long day.
So just go on the.
Is that where you feel weak?
Did you have that?
No, I never. And I'm gonna have to get the blood.
No.
pressure.
Sorry, I'm right-handed.
No, I'm gonna get up shortly.
Okay.
There we go.
Actually, I'll go to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you slide back here? Left, so. Can you see? You get a breather.
So, good evening, everybody. We're going to do our pavement management update for fiscal year 2026 to 2028. We do this every year just to give everybody an update about what we're doing with our roads and how we can, what we're planning on doing for the next couple of years. So first of all, pavement management. The idea is to try to do the right thing at the right time in the right way. So it keeps, make the right repairs so we're not spending money and just concentrating on one little piece of road. We're looking at the overall system as a whole to make sure that we can keep everything functioning on time, on budget. One of the advantages that we've recently done is we moved to a new software platform last year. We got to beta tested it last year and really getting the kinks out and really utilizing that software to help program out our responsibilities for the next 3 years and even further. So first, what did we do last year? We paved about almost 20,000 linear feet of roadway between Mill Sammy and Overlay, Mill and Overlay Reclamation. We spent almost $1.5 million in funding on the roads.
That was really
Oh, yeah.
made possible by a grant that Greg applied for municipal paving. So that's why it's a higher amount than we usually see.
So we spent about $700,000 in Chapter 90 money. The Fair Share Act gave us about $300,000 in spending on the roads. And then we spent, again, a grant from the state of about $600,000 that we spent 4 and change on.
That's great.
Fantastic.
So in the last 13 years, we spent a little over $12 million on all our roads. The aggregate road surface rating for the town is about a 75. Doing a little bit of a deep dive into those numbers, our mains are rated about an 88. So our bay roads, our foundries, our depots, the roads that get the most traffic are rated an 88. Our residential roads are about a 65. And that's on average. I don't think that's any surprise to anybody listening. We have a backlog of about $15 million worth of work. So if we got $15 million tomorrow, we'd be able to bring the whole roadway network up to into the mid-90s. So what are we doing going forward? Well, this year we're going to be working on, last year we had some water main replacement on Barrows Day at Oakland, right around COA. The roads over there are pretty cut up between the water main work and the other utility work, so we're going to have to do full depth reclamation on those roadways. While we're over there, we're going to also do Bridge Street, Hayward Street, and Park Street. We're going to do...
Greg, just for folks at home, reclamation is
Oh,
like
I'm sorry.
a total rebuild.
So yes, full depth reclamation. We're going to come in. We're going to pulverize the streets down to a foot and a half, and then we're going to rebuild them.
So like brand new road.
Brand new roads.
Yeah, so that'll be such a huge improvement for that area, which will be
Yes.
great for
And that will
whether
also
it's
include
seniors getting to Frothingham Hall or people of all ages going to Frothingham Park. So I'm excited for that.
sidewalk improvements where we need them.
Yeah.
Drainage improvements to help the stormwater flow. Yeah, just an overall lift in that particular area. One of the things I'm excited about is we're going to be able to get into some of our neighborhood roads this year and do some overlay work. These are roads that we get frequent complaints about potholes and delamination, and they're the next 4 roads that we need to work on. We're going to go in and do an overlay. We're going to adjust the castings. We're going to do some sidewalk work. So Anthony Road, a section of Copperfield, Squantum Avenue right around the corner, and Galahad Way, which is one of our frequent flyers for potholes. We're getting complaints and notifications that the road is coming apart. And finally, we're going to do some crack sealing, which is just general maintenance on the roadways all over town this year. We haven't done it for a couple of years. We try to, instead of bringing in a contractor for $20,000 here, $30,000 here, we wait until we need the whole town to be done. They'll be here for 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how long it takes and what the weather is. For those of you unfamiliar with what crack sealing is, it's the little squiggly lines that literally are filling in the cracks in the roadway to prevent potholes from forming further on, later on.
Greg, what has been shown? How long does that, how beneficial is the crack sealing bit,
It
generally?
So if you don't fill the cracks over time in the winter, water will get into those cracks and create potholes. And over time, that will degrade your road a lot faster. Whereas if I'm filling the cracks on a normal basis, we can keep the good roads in good shape longer.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's actually,
It's extending the life of the roadway.
and those cracks they're filled in, and it helps hold it together longer.
Yeah, so
Doesn't allow
there's
the
two
water-
different types. too.
Water
You-
gets in there, freezes, expands.
Yes.
Exactly. So we're preventing that water intrusion into the road. We want to keep it just kind of like a roof. If you have a water leak in your roof, it's going to ruin the substrate and it's eventually going to, damage your walls. So we just want to keep that, watertight. The crack sealing has to be reapplied periodically. So we do come back every few years because you have working cracks that will extend further, so we got to put more crack seal on it. So it's not a one-time thing, it's something we maintain until that road requires some sort of other treatment.
Great, thank you.
And we can only, yeah, Dave said we can only crack seal it so many times before we have to go on to the next repair Band-Aid.
Got it.
2027, point out Bay Road. This section of Bay Road had recently received, and I'll go into this in a little more detail here shortly. We had a drainage failure with some of our pipe in the road, so we had to remove that and replace that. So that's going to necessitate that we're going to have to mill and overlay this road over that trench in 2027.
Where is that roughly in Bay Road?
Just south of Highland down
Okay.
to, if
Got it.
last year, last fall, if you noticed, DPW was out doing construction work. We had the road closed during the day. It's in that same general area.
Got it.
If you drive over today, you'll see the trench on the southbound side. That's where the drainage failure was. The northbound side will be milled and overlaid. We'll just take off the top 2 inches, put 2 inches back. The road's in pretty good condition otherwise. We're also going to do Depot Street. This road has been coming up for paving for the past couple of years, but we've deferred it because, as you notice, it's right next to the new public safety complex. With all of the construction that will be coming in, it doesn't make sense to pave a road, have all the construction vehicles drive all over it, and then have to repair it again. So towards the end of that project, we will be paving this section of roadway.
Greg, that's also because we're going to have utility extensions going there as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
It's,
So
yes.
sewer, water,
Yes.
and
But it came up on its own volition. and
Right,
then-
yeah.
So that's why we're waiting till that's finished. to
so that's
program it.
likely to then match the quality of the rest of Depot.
Correct.
So that'll
And that's why that hasn't been done yet.
sure. Awesome.
We're also doing the same on Main Street. Main Street, especially towards the Brockton line, is in pretty tough shape. I know I drive it twice a day coming to and from home to work and work back to home. Same idea. We're going to finish the fire station, and when that's complete, we'll be paving this.
Okay.
High Street is our last piece for 2027, and it's a little run into Brockton. Just a little overlay. The road gets a lot more traffic than I think we appreciate. It's a shortcut to get through to Brockton to avoid some traffic lights. So we'll be taking care of that then. And then finally, in 2028, in conjunction with our Elm Street extension project, this section keeps coming up on pavement management. So this section of Elm Street will be milled and overlaid from Washington Street down to the Brockton line.
Greg, is the idea that that would be done like roughly around the same time, or 2028, that'll be towards the tail end of the DOT project to
Correct.
square up and signalize that intersection?
Yep, and
So-
I'll go into that in a little more detail here in a second.
We're so eager, we're like asking you the questions in
Yeah,
advance.
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good.
These are really good repairs.
Lincoln Street, I don't know if we noticed Lincoln Street, it's gotten a lot of crack seal work done over the past couple of years. It's time to go to that next phase, that next Band-Aid. It'll be we call it preventative maintenance, but it's a Nova chip. The idea is we'll put down an aggregate, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch in size, and then we'll put asphalt over it so it acts as a brand new resurfacing to the roadway. It's a little more structurally, it's not quite sealing your roadway, it's a little more structurally sound than that. It's putting another layer back on the road. We've used it in town in other places, it works very well, and that's what we'll be doing on Lincoln Street. We'll be doing it on Oliver Road, and we'll be doing it on Summer Street. In addition to that, we'll be doing some routine maintenance on Mechanic Street. Mechanic Street's right on the edge of whether it needs crack sealing or preventative maintenance right now. But the projections call for it needing routine maintenance, so it'll get crack sealed at the very least in 2028.
I'm watching this and thinking how great this is. It's so much work. And then the other part of my brain is like, we're going to start getting so many complaints about people speeding on the roads as soon as we get the roads under condition.
So what we tend to do is on roads that we know get a lot of traffic, we do have a data collector, and we will hang the data collector out before and after just to give a comparison of, okay, yes, we just paved your road, but it's not as bad as you think it is. You know, they may have been going 33 miles an hour on average before, now they're doing 36 and 37.
Oh, that's
so
good to
it's
know.
perceived, but the perception is not as bad as you think it is. So
Oh,
that's
good.
tend to, you know.
So potholes are not good speed management like we thought.
So our proposed repairs for the next 3 years, we're forecasting about $2 million. We're spending about $900,000 this year, and about $600,000 for the next 2 years after that. remaining service life analysis. It's a real simple way to calculate, where are we in our roadway network? Every year, every single center lane mile in road ages 1 year. And are we putting enough with the repairs that we're doing? And each repair we do injects so much life back into the system. So last year, we added 60 miles of center lane miles back into the system. So we only had a deficit of 56 miles. So we lost 56 miles. Some years we have a lot of losses. Sometimes we have a little bit of gains. But this is just an idea of where we are right now.
Greg or Dave, I don't know if you're going to work this in here, but for anyone at home, most of the funding we just covered was out of Chapter 90 state funds, right? We don't have a recurring local appropriation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, another something else I was about to get into.
Sorry.
It's quite all right.
The key on this slide before
Yeah.
we get off it is we should be based on the average, not any individual year. The calculation for how much we need to spend changes because some years are heavier on certain repairs that are more cost effective, some are more expensive. So if you look at the average, and it's a very conservative way, we should be spending about $2 million per year on roads.
Right.
We are not doing that.
Right.
As you said, we have not appropriated anything locally since FY 15 for local money. So this is
Which was one of the cuts in the last override failure.
Yes,
Yes.
this is entirely on state funding. It's a question we get a lot. We get
Right.
a lot of complaints about various roads saying my tax money is not fixing the road. And I say you're right. There is no tax money going to roads. Not at all. It's not since 2015.
But that challenge is exacerbated by the fact that the Chapter 90 program, although we've had a couple of years recently that have been better, went over a decade of being functionally level funded, during which time we lost like 40% of our purchasing power, right? And this is the primary mechanism cities and towns around the state rely on. I think you can see some of the fiscal years that jump out there are years where even if we don't have local recurring capital spend, which we ought to have and want to have, other large projects add a huge amount of mile years to our roads. Depot Street was funded by state and federal dollars, hugely important. That I think was fiscal.
It's not included in this.
No, not included in here.
This is only pavement management fund.
So that still, those projects give us a ton of added value and take life off of our system, whether that's the sewer project on Foundry or water work on Depot or other things like that, or the forthcoming 138 and Elm.
So again, to your point, our actual expenditure, what our target should be, and the gaps that we have here, how much we're spending every year. The roads are degrading a little bit every year. Again, to your point, Connor, Depot Street injected some life back into the roadway.
Okay.
The Foundry Street sewer project, the Five Corners sewer project injected some life back into the system. So the question comes up, why don't we spend all of our Chapter 90 money every year? We get approximately between $700,000 and $750,000 in Chapter 90 funds every year. How come we're only budgeting $500,000 2 years out? Well, we need to spend that money in other places as well. The first one that comes up is we have emergency repairs in town, things that we cannot forecast for, some things that we can't plan for, and we need to have funds able to repair, to make those changes. Last year, in February, during a snow event, one of our trucks was driving by and noticed a 20 by 10 sinkhole open up in the roadway. Okay, and it happened. I want to say it was a borderline miracle that nobody drove into it. It would have swallowed a car.
It almost swallowed our truck.
Yeah, when he was driving.
One of our drivers felt something, looked in the mirror, and saw a hole behind him. So,
Wow.
basically, the truck that
Was that the one on Bay Road?
Yes.
Wow.
So we immediately dispatched DPW crews out after the snow event. We filled it with crushed stone, patched it as best we could, kept an eye on it for the winter until we could effect repairs in the spring. During our investigation, we had a camera truck go out and go up and down the drain line that had failed. Turns out we have about 1,200 linear feet of corrugated metal pipe in that section of Bay Road had failed. It was either corroded or non-existent in some places and was gone. So the sinkhole that we saw was not a one-off event. If we don't do anything, those potholes, those sinkholes are going to pop up in greater occurrence along the stretch of the roadway. DPW, Matt Groeschel put a plan together, went out, did a survey, made the measurements, came up with the design plan in-house, quantified everything, and then the highway was able to go out and make the repairs using Chapter 90 funds. We spent about $100,000 in pipe and material and asphalt, and able to do this work in-house in an emergency basis.
Yeah. So as Greg said, that came out of Chapter 90. We do not have a line item for emergency drainage replacement. We have a small line item, like $25,000 for pipes and grates. So that didn't even
That's
cover
something
it.
on the
So
scale would never be able
our
to.
option would go to reserve fund transfer or use our Chapter 90, which is an allowable expense for drainage repairs and improvements. So that's one example. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, we're only able to do this $400,000 using the highway division to be able to make this work. If we had to bid this work out, the cost would have been much higher than what
Probably
we had.
close to $500,000.
Well, and also designed by an engineer and staff
Correct.
as well, right? So I think that's important to point out as well, just like the pickleball courts at OA.
Yes.
Right.
The next project up that we have to is hiring outside consultants to do design work for us for some of the larger projects that we can't handle on a day-to-day basis. The first one is Elm Street signalization. We initiated this project with Mass DOT 7 years ago?
A little longer than that, but yeah.
Yeah.
It was seed money from development agreement, started the project, the PNF, and then we put in Chapter 90 money to get the design going. Luckily, the state stepped in. Once they wanted to increase the scope, and we kind of pushed back a little bit about paying for that. They actually took over the whole project, which is great because that saved us probably $500,000 to $750,000 in design funds. But having that ability to fund the design leverages a $7 million improvement, which is great.
And it's not just the intersection that's going to have the signalization. It's going to connect Elm Street to Union Street with sidewalk. So the work that was done on Union Street and started 3 or 4 years ago with that intersection redesign, it will connect the corridor down to Elm Street.
It's not just sidewalk, though, isn't it? New road.
New road, sidewalk.
Sidewalk, bike lane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Complete in.
With sidewalks extending down to Langwater Farm, right?
Yes.
Yes. So we should say thanks to the state on that because
Yes.
we criticized them.
And they're out to bid right now. We should have results in the next. The state's kind of funny about that, but by later this spring, early summer, we should know who the contractor is and when the start date is. And if we use Union Street as any type of guideline, the construction should take 18 to 24 months off the top of my head. They said Depot Street was going to take 5 years. They were done in 2, so we'll have to see how aggressive the contractor wants to be with that type of work.
Well, as somebody who uses that intersection multiple
It's gonna
times
be
a
an
day,
enormous safety improvement.
Yes.
I'm very happy about that.
I try to avoid it as much as I can, only because I know I'm going to sit there for 5 or 10 minutes trying to make a left or a right. It's going to be a massive improvement when it's done.
And it will geometrically align
Yes.
that, so it's not a wonky kind of.
It's not a quick left and a quick right. It's going to
Yeah.
be a straight through. The next project that we have lined up is the Foundry Street Tip Project. In the line of what we did with Depot Street, we're going to do to Foundry Street from 5 corners down to Eastman Street, expanding the roadway, shared use path on the south side, sidewalk on the north side, and 3 culvert replacements. New Pond and Old Pond have dry laid stone culverts that were built, we think, in the 1850s and 1860s. This project will replace those with bridges, more in line with current stream water crossing standards, and we'll widen the roadway out so we can put the shared use path and the sidewalks out. We're still in pre-25% design phase right now. We're going back and forth with the state. Our design engineer, TEC, is doing an excellent job coordinating this job. It's only 1.5 miles, 2 miles, but it's very complicated. We're expecting to have something called a design public hearing, where we'll invite everybody in town, and especially the abutters, to come out, take a look at the 25% plans, and if they have any comments about what they see, that'll be the time to do it. And then it'll be the process of going through the 75, 100% PS&E phases, and getting the job permitted, designed, permitted, and built. This project, currently the estimate for it is about $15, $16 million that'll be paid for by the state. We have to pay for the design through using Chapter 9, primarily. To this point, we've been very successful in getting grants to pay for the design, for the early design of this project. If those grants dry up, we're going to have to use Chapter 90 funds to continue the design of this project. But again, the money that we put into this is, if we use Depot Street as an example, it was, $1 million in design work, $1 million in takings, and we got $10 to $12 million in construction fees. So especially for a job like this, it's worth every penny to invest those funds into this design to get this done.
Right, but today we've actually not even had to do that. It looks like there's almost
We've used
a
a very,
small amount.
like
Yeah.
$30,000 in
than-
Chapter 90 to bridge a gap. But we've been lucky, and this
Yeah,
is a
more
testament to the cooperation, the grant writing from all the departments. Planning has been able to secure 2 different community choice grants and a MassWorks grant. So that's been very successful. But we are anticipating needing some Chapter 90 money at some point, or other local appropriation to continue the design effort at some point.
I think those are both grant programs, Dottie, correct me if I'm wrong, that are tied to being compliant with MBTA zoning, right? And so having access to that type of funding to get these projects moving so that we could then capitalize on substantially larger returns on investment from the state.
And being a housing choice community.
Correct, and being a housing choice community, we would not have access to the funds to get the design moving, and certainly then wouldn't be able to get these 10 or 15 plus $1 million projects.
Correct.
That are not funded. We do not have to do debt exclusions locally for those are paid by the state.
Right. And, one of the last things we want to do is be reactive with one of those culverts on 106.
Yeah.
We have 20,000 trips, 25,000 trips a day on those cars. All of a sudden we have to shut the road down and detour everybody back down Highland Street like we did during the sewer project for years in order to come up with the design, construction of all those culvert, soon to be bridges. It's not really, it keeps me awake at night. It's one of the things I worry about.
Sure, it keeps the people on Highland Street awake, too.
Yeah, well, I hope not.
Well, one of the things also to mention is when we talk about the grants, these grants are competitive grants, and there's only so much money every year. So Easton consistently it receives these awards, and part of the reason for that is because you've demonstrated good use of the funds, getting the funds, doing the work the way it was expected, getting it completed in the amount of time that you have to complete it, being shovel ready to go. The timing is really important. So I just want to also just give another shout out. The details of getting the grant and executing the grant are really important, and having the state know that you do a good job with it makes them want to give you the next grant.
And there's 2 things at play, and thank you, Dottie, appreciate that. There's 2 things at play here. There's the design money and the grants that planning's helping us with securing. Then there's also the competitive funds through the MPO, which is Old Colony Planning Council. We've been lucky that we've actually gotten more grants than our fair share so far. And we're hopeful to get Fondler Street programmed. It's not programmed yet, but we're hopeful that maybe in 5 years, we're going to start cracking that appropriation. It's a huge project, and there's only so much for the entire region. So we have to kind of wait our chance, I guess, but we've been successful so far in getting more than our fair share from the Old Colony Planning Council. They've been good to work with.
Yeah, they told me before, Easton can't get all the money all the time.
We can try though.
Yes, we're going to put in for every last time. The next project that we'd like to point out is a state-driven intersection redesign for Washington Street, Turnpike Street, and Purchase Street. I think anybody who lives in town is very familiar with this town, especially with the intersection of Washington Street and Purchase Street. The state recognizes that it is a dangerous intersection, and they've hired niche engineering to begin the design process. We can only do so much. We changed the intersection at Purchase and Turnpike. Matt was here, so it was 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, 3 years ago.
We added a 4-way stop that reduced the number of accidents at that particular intersection. But that's about all we can do right now, because the major design component in this is a state-owned roadway, and they have to lead the ship on that one. And they are. They're stepping up and starting to go through the design process to maybe put it in the signalized intersection there, or some sort of traffic, whatever they need to do. I don't want to speak for them because they're still early in the process, but evaluating what kind of traffic improvements need to happen there.
So this is in front of Doyle's.
Yes.
Well, it's all three intersections.
But it's
They're
all three
being looked at
intersections.
at the same time.
You can't not do one without how it affects the other. So
Right.
they have to.
But I just want to call out that, like, I know the Turnpike Street one where we've already done some work there, but the Doyle's one hasn't had anything, the corner there of Purchase and 138. And it just feels like I'm always hearing about accidents
It's
there, and people
extremely,
are always saying,
yes, challenging.
why can't we do anything about it? And it's a long process, and the state has to lead that. But, you know, kudos for getting the state's attention on that. You have to use all your data and really petition for them to come out and look at that. So
We did. We did contact the state, and they did react pretty quickly. There had been a previous project that had been mothballed that didn't go anywhere, and they kind of resurrected it and moved pretty quickly on that. So we're optimistic that this project will continue down the tip path and get funded at some point and make a meaningful improvement.
I also do want to say, you know, that there is a database for the amount of crashes at the different intersections. And it seems sometimes like the perception is that there's more accidents at a particular, not necessarily just there, but other places. And part of the reason is that if you have a fender bender and you don't report that, it doesn't get included. So a lot of people see some of those things where there's a couple of cars on the side of the road. Thankfully, there wasn't tremendous damage, but it's still an accident. So I would just say to people, you really need to report any kind of an accident of any kind of severity to just get it on those lists.
Two more projects that weren't on the slideshow that we may need to use for Chapter 90 funding. The first is the Main Street culvert just out of Northeastern Village as you're going towards Washington Street. We've submitted for a municipal small bridge grant to fund the repair on that. When and if we do get it, and we're hoping it is because the state recommended that we put in for it, we'll need to use Chapter 90 money to fund the gap between design and construction for bidding assistance for permitting. So we'll be using Chapter 90 money for that. But that'll be again, $50,000 or $60,000 in Chapter 90 money for $500,000 in state funds to repair this culvert. The other one is Lincoln Street, where we ended the sidewalk with our previous project. We got a complete streets grant to finish it, and we'll use Chapter 90 money to make up the shortfall between the grant and to complete it. So we're hoping to get that taken care of sometime this year.
Yeah, it was a $100,000 grant, but the estimate's closer to $250,000, so we'll have to supplement that. So we do keep like a working kind of reserve on Chapter 90 at all times, just for these type of things. But we do spend all of our Chapter 90 at some point. It all gets spent in a reliable way. Unfortunately, right now, fortunately, the governor is talking about increasing Chapter 90, but it hasn't been approved yet. So we have to go on the assumption of kind of our historic Chapter 90 levels, and if it comes in higher, that just gives us more room to work, and we'll program more in the second year of our plan or the third year. So.
And at this point, if anybody has any questions about what we're planning to do for the next 3 years from a roadway management standpoint.
I just want to notice that you used the GIS system for that presentation with the story map, so I appreciate that.
I think a lot of hard work's gone into. I see the number 15 million as the backlog, and in years past, it's been upwards of 20.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that is that we moved to a new software platform, so the way they estimate it changed a little bit from one platform to the other, but it's still a tremendous amount of money that we're not going to get tomorrow, unless somebody wins the lottery and donates it to the town.
Yeah, some of that's Depot Street too, because Depot Street did come online,
Yes.
so it's been resurveyed, and it doesn't require as much money, so that's something we used to count towards our backlog. Now it's gone, so.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. I just see the proactive work, and we don't get a ton. If you live on Galahad or some of these other streets, yeah, you're getting a lot of calls, but for the most part, we see the amount of work that goes into getting us even to where we are with that backlog. So thank you.
Just thank you so much for continuing to pursue grants to support this work. That's huge. I don't think people kind of grasp just how much more gets done because of that. So thank you. One quick question I have is, are you guys seeing a lot of impact from extreme rain events that we're seeing more and more of in terms of road condition deteriorating faster?
Yes and no. So obviously, every spring is challenging when you get the freeze-thaw cycles, and it really blew up on us this year. Whether it's the rain events, I'm not sure whether it's directly, but it's just definitely that freeze-thaw cycle is really problematic for us.
Yeah, it's been a
So,
wacky
yeah.
spring too,
Yeah.
so, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Great presentation. The grants that Jim was speaking of, you guys are now conditioned to be, you've been conditioned for a number of years. Like, we need this in order for us to survive, and that's what the community's come to expect. But it is above and beyond. And so, how well you guys do out there is, it's become expected, but it's not underappreciated.
Thank you.
It's a very helpful presentation. I like the way you've done it, the new system, so I can actually see where it is that you're working on. And somebody said something about the speed that people go on the newly paved roads. Well, I know that when I've talked to David about that. So, thank you both.
Well, great presentation. Public Works makes it happen. So thank you very much.
And this will be on, we'll put the report up on our website, so anyone can look at it, look at the completed repairs report in the next 3 years.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you both.
sticking it out. Sorry. it's so
Thanks for your
late.
patience tonight.
Thanks, guys, appreciate it. Enjoy your vacation.
Greg, you can just leave it there. That's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Dottie, we jumped around a bit, so we're at item 7.
Yep. Is Wendy here for something specific?
Wendy, you were here for the warrant. Is that accurate? Yeah. Okay, do you want to do that?
Do you want to do that and then?
Yeah, that's fine. It's late.
yeah.
We get Wendy out of here.
All right, so
item
the
14.
review, number 14, the review for the May 19th, 2025 annual town meeting warrant draft. We have Article 3, which is acceptance of Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5C and 1/2, and Section 5, Clause 221, or 22I, to allow for an additional exemption for qualifying taxpayers and annual percentage increases on certain veterans exemptions.
Sure, thanks, Dottie. We're not taking votes of inclusion and recommendation on Articles 1 and 2 for the budget. I do want to draw to your attention if it didn't stick out. We've had some placeholders in there in previous drafts for the public's benefit, although the budget's not fully done yet. We will have a summary of PACE. PACE will be presenting at town meeting as town meeting had voted a year ago. Article 1 is a normal placeholder, and we've included a placeholder for Article 2 for the override with a bit more detail. So that's in there. That'll be published tomorrow. Article 3, Dottie, this is consistent with not only some of the goals that we have set and some of the work that we have done with tax relief programs. This is feedback we heard from a lot of folks during the PACE open house process. It's feedback we heard from PACE, the PACE committee itself. It's part of a pledge that PACE recommended that the Select Board, Finance Committee, and School Committee adopt. And Wendy and BJ, the Chief Assessor, and Director Kennedy have worked on pulling this together. And this is a contingent vote. It's contingent on the override passing because expanding these tax relief programs will cost money, which is good. I mean, if the expansion was so modest that it could fit in a budget being cut as much as ours, then you could make an argument that it's not necessarily going to make as much of an impact for recipients. Passage of this article would provide additional tax relief to qualifying individuals for the exemptions referenced above. Section 5C.5 would effectively double all existing applicable exemptions, being limited only in instances where the additional amounts of tax reductions would reduce taxes below 10% of the full value of the property. Wendy can explain that more intelligently than I can. Acceptance of 59, Section 5, Clause 22I. This part of the HEROES Act would increase the amount of tax exemptions granted to veterans under any of the above referenced clauses annually, so it'll get pegged to inflation on a go-forward basis. The projected annual impact of this is approximately $150,000. That would be, I believe, an overlay, Wendy, so that would be a pretty sizable increase to the overlay. budget, which is typically between 500,000 and 600,000.
It's 500,000.
Okay, so you're looking at a 30% increase to the tax exemptions that folks would qualify for. Yeah. Wendy, can you confirm for me so doubling exemptions, so that's for like a lot of the existing statutory exemptions related to certain disability status,
Elderly,
age,
veterans,
income, veteran
surviving
status.
spouses.
So it would increase that exemption by 100%.
100%, but there are limitations. The biggest one being that you can't, the additional exemption is limited so that you cannot pay less taxes than you did in the previous year. But essentially, that would, if that would be the case, then that would cover the increase in taxes for the year.
Okay. Any questions from the board? So a motion to include and recommend Article 3?
Yes, please, if you're
Okay, I
willing.
move to include, recommend Article 3.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Next is Article 5, supplement for the fiscal 2025 budgets.
I believe at this time we're just asking for a vote to include. Is that correct, Wendy?
That's correct.
Okay, motion to include,
Motion
Craig?
motion to include Article 5.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous.
Great.
Article 7, establish spending limits for revolving funds.
Sure, so under state law, the board has to set, or town meeting has to set every year the spend limits for revolving funds. These are limits for the total amount that could be spent regardless of how much is collected from these fees.
Several of these have just been increased from the previous year, and that's just based on some of the balances that have accumulated, so that in the event we needed to spend most of that balance, we would be able to do that. So the changes are for the planning board. It was 50,000. It's just been increased to 75,000. ZBA revolving was at 15. We just increased it to 20. And police cruiser detail fees was at 30,000, and that's been increased to 50,000. And again, you can't spend more than what is in the fund.
Okay. Any comments, questions?
I move to include and recommend Article 7.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Article 11, the fire department safety training.
So Article 11 is one of the many ways the budget is impacting our business. This should not be a special article. Typically, and this is why cutting police and fire is the last thing we do on the town side. Normally, a police and fire department $5 or $6 million budget should be carrying sufficient funds to cover reasonably anticipated training. This is to wrap up ongoing training that was part of a regional grant. It's $50,000, and I believe an additional $10,000 related to a fire truck. To mitigate the number of total job cuts in the department and recognizing that the lion's share of this is wrapping up a non-recurring training, we moved that cost, not moved, but we've cut the training budget in the fire department for multiple years now because of the budget. So this will be funding using one-time funds likely available from free cash for training that we don't anticipate to recur.
Okay.
So I move to include and recommend Article 11.
Second.
Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Article 12, transferred to injured on duty indemnity fund.
Sure, thank you. The town established a few years back through town meeting the Injured on Duty Indemnity Fund. This is a special reserve account that the select board has the authority to manage, where the police and fire departments can, under extenuating circumstances, access a small amount of reserves for payroll and medical costs relating to IOD, overtime costs for shift coverage and things of that nature. Due to how deeply we're cutting police and fire, both reducing jobs, reducing overtime, we want to put available one-time money of $50,000 into this fund so that there is that small pressure relief in the event that there's an injury on duty in the coming year and associated overtime costs that we realistically would not be able to absorb if the override fails.
Okay.
Move to recommend and include Article 12.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Wendy.
Wendy?
Thank you,
Kate,
Wendy,
sticking with us tonight.
for drawing the shortest of the short straws.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to go back to item 7, which is a discussion and vote on the Board of Registrar's recommendation for early voting in person for the June 10th special town election.
Sure, thanks, Dottie. In your packet, there's a memo from Town Clerk Danielle Sicard advising the board that the registrars are recommending that early voting be offered for a special town election for June 10th. Please note that under state law, early voting is not permitted for the special state election that's happening on June 10th. I don't know why, but that's apparently the rule. The draft, there's a draft motion here. Early voting by mail is allowed for both the state special and the town special election being held on June 10th. And all information for folks, including the many ways that they could vote, is available at easton.us/vote. So for early voting for a town election like this, the Board of Registrars need to meet and consider it. They did, and they voted to recommend it. And so if you are to take their recommendation, I believe there's a voter registration deadline or some other electoral activity the clerk's office have to be open for on Saturday, the 31st. So that this fits nicely with the staff will be here. So it would offer 1 day of in-person, although again, there's no excuse to vote by mail. Not everyone votes by mail. This expands the opportunities for folks to weigh in on a very important community decision. So it would be in-person early voting here at the town offices from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday, May 31st. There's a motion here.
When is the state primary?
May 13th.
May 13th.
May 13th? Oh, boy, we're going to be like
Yeah, the clerk's office is
voting and more voting.
is
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
another great example of people doing an incredible amount.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of, and that's why I really do encourage people. It sounds paternalistic, but there's a lot of potential for this to get confusing because there's so many votes and electoral things happening in a.
I think there was a nice chart in the town crier.
Yes, Elizabeth did that. That was her idea,
Yeah,
not mine.
that was very
good for-
helpful.
Yes.
Nice
We'll-
job,
work, yeah.
Elizabeth.
We will keep doing that, and there's the voter homepage as well. So, yeah, and they have different rules because some are state specials, some are town elections. So there's a lot going on.
All right, Craig.
In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 54, Section 25B, 8C, 1-3, I move to take action on the Board of Registrar's recommendation and to offer early voting in person for the June 10th, 2025 special town election on Saturday, May 31st, 2025, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Easton Town Offices, 136 Elm Street, Easton, Mass.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Is that your chair, or is there an animal in that wall? There's some squeaking noise.
Really? Maybe it is. I don't know.
Maybe it's the chair.
I mean, we're gonna find out, I guess.
I'm nervous something's going to jump out of there.
It's the 10 o'clock ghost.
All right, next we have item 10.
9.
9.
Yeah.
Wait a
No,
minute.
we did 9.
No, we did 9. Item
Oh, I'm
10
sorry.
We have
is
10 and 11.
the acceptance of the
Right.
Stonehill College annual gift and a possible vote authorizing Stonehill gift funds for promoting a sustainable Easton/town meeting related mailing, postage, information, and committee expenses.
Sure, thanks, Dottie. Stonehill College has presented the town with a gift of $40,000. We have a letter of thanks to the college from a board signature. What is our typical practice is I'd recommend that $20,000 of that gift be allocated, $8,000 to the public schools, $5,000 to the library, $7,000 to health and community services. I'd also request that the board consider allocating $9,400 of that gift to cover costs of outreach, mailing, information, things of that nature to Easton residents, and for logistics-related expenses for running a third open house for PACE. And I think that rolls in with administrative costs for town meeting as well. We anticipate a lot higher turnout at town meeting than is typical. Printing costs will be substantial, as well as for administrative costs supporting the PACE committee. If the board votes to accept this gift and the recommended allocations, I would leave $22,327 available.
I just want to be really crystal clear on this. So the funding that is going to go to PACE, this is informational information. It's not advocating for anything.
Correct.
It's really just saying, letting people know about it if they don't already know about it, and being clear about when when the meetings are and inviting people to another open house, so.
That's correct. Yeah, it'll tell people, much like the first mailer that went out, that there's two choices coming. There's going to be a lot of cuts or a tax increase. Those are hard choices. Come learn about them. Here's key dates for you as a voter, but it's not telling people you need to go vote yes. That would be inappropriate.
All right. All right, Craig?
So I move to accept the Stonehill College annual gift of $40,000 and authorize the $9,400, authorize $8,000 for public schools, $5,000 for Amesfield Library, $7,000 for Health and Community Services, and $9,400 towards the cost cost of outreach to Easton residents and event planning for the third PACE Open House Town Meeting.
And town meeting, sorry.
And town meeting.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor?
Thank you.
All right, next we have the nomination of Inspector of Animals, Jordan Holbrook.
Sure. In your packet is a memo just submitted by Director Kennedy requesting the nomination of Jordan Holbrook, who is our animal control officer, to serve as the animal inspector for Easton for the Department of Agricultural Resources, Division of Animal Health. Currently, Ms. Holbrook serves the town in this capacity as part of her position as animal control officer. The expiration is April 30th, 2026. I recommend the nomination be done by roll call. Please.
I move to nominate Jordan Holbrook to be the Inspector of Animals.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb,
Stebbins Holbrook.
Stacy Holbrook.
Lamb Holbrook.
full Janetti Holbrook.
Barger Holbrook.
Great, excellent. Next, item 15, acceptance of minutes of March 24th, 2025.
So moved, Barger.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor, unanimous. Town administrator notes.
I have none prepared.
Sean, assistant.
I'll make a brief note for the tricentennial events that are coming up between now and our next meeting. The Langwater Family Fun Weekend Day is on the 19th, and the Arts and Cultural Festival is on the 26th. Tons of volunteer time have gone into planning for this, and a lot of staff time to be able to support the logistics of it. So we're looking forward to those in the next couple of weekends.
Excellent. Yeah, there's for the 26th. I just pulled it up on easton300.org. So the 19th, the 26th, the 27th, a couple of things on the 26th. So there's a lot of stuff coming up.
Funny, don't we have household hazardous waste day somewhere in the mix?
The 19th.
19th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it the 19th or the 26th?
19th, it's a separate day.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's it's hazardous this time too, which means we got the arrangement with for hazardous disposal, which we didn't do last year.
The 19th.
Yeah.
And I think Drug Take Back Day is coming up too. I don't have the date on that.
I
And the
apologize.
annual town election.
And the
on
town
26th.
election.
Yeah. Just get the town crier. Look at all the
Yeah,
dates in
honestly,
there.
I was just looking for it, but it'll be in the town crier.
A lot of stuff going on.
A lot of good things.
Yeah.
A lot of good people doing good things. Thank you to all of them.
Any comments from the select board?
Craig made mention to it earlier tonight, and I just want to as well say that we know our colleagues on the school side are going through trying times right now, and myself, everyone here at the table actually attended last week the budget hearing, and I just commend them on the job and the work they've been doing, because we know how difficult it is, and the way they've maintained their professionalism and the way they've talked with constituents and continue to offer information and be as open and transparent as we are on this side. So I just want to commend them for the great work over there.
Thank you for that.
Agreed. Jen?
Well said. No updates from me.
No comments here?
Nope, nothing here.
I was trying to look for Drug Take Back Day, but I'm not really finding it very quickly. I think it's April 26th, but double check. All right, we are going to go into an executive session under Purpose 3 of Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with all town bargaining units. We are also going to be discussing strategy with respect to litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position. And we are not going to, I'm sorry, that's for relating to the Town of Easton / Rent Control Board and Easton Mobile Home Corp. LLC. So we are not going to return to open session. We'll take a roll call vote and adjourn this meeting and then enter into executive session. So Craig,
Roger, yes?
well, a motion
Oh,
to
you want-
adjourn.
oh, excuse me.
To,
Sorry,
a motion,
I would ask her to just move what you have read, the motion as presented.
yeah.
Second.
So that's
Go for it, buddy.
Lemon Bodger and
Stebbins, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Yes.
Full Janetti, yes.
Roger, yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe. We
you,
appreciate
Joe.
ECAT
Thank you.
sticking with us on this long meeting.